The other thing at the moment is at the back of this side of Ngā Purapura, you'll see our team down there from Te Wānanga o Raukawa. Very important for anybody who hasn't registered yet to come across before we get going. So we're running slightly behind schedule, and I'm really keen to pick up some time so we can get into our first presenter for this morning. So as soon as you're ready, come across, and I'll ask our Te Wānanga o Raukawa staff to guide our manihiri across to the tables now. And in about 5 minutes, we'll be making a start. Nō reira, kia ora tātou.
Maybe even one of them.
Oh yeah, let's do that. All right, I'll grab
Okay, yep.
Okay, everyone, I'm getting the signal, and the signal means it's time to kick things off. So I'm going to once again ask all of you to come across and make your way to one of these tables. Don't matter if you haven't met the people on the table yet, because that's what this hui is all about. An opportunity to embrace whakaungatanga. So hara mai, grab something to eat, cup of tea, make your way across. For those of you who are using Twitter, here's your hashtag, and the sooner you get started by tweeting something, the greater the momentum. So I've got the hashtag here, and one of our crew is going to carry this around to the tables. The first person who gets something up on the site, we might throw in a wānanga gift of some sort, some description. So whoever that person is, once you've got it up, come and let me know, and I'll let our crew down the back. Well, I'll remind them that you're the first person to get a tweet up about our hui today. Just while we're waiting, I want to take a brief moment to explain where the restrooms are. And to get there, you need to go through either of these two back doors. So if you look behind you, you'll see the two exits there, and you carry on past what's called the kāpahu or maungatai, and you'll see the signs for Tāne and Wahine. Now, for those of you who were here yesterday, remember I said that if you're Wahine, you don't go into the Tāne side, and if you're Tāne, you don't go into the Wahine side, and if you do, you'll hear all about it. So Wahine, I'm going to give you a very quick lesson in Te Reo Māori. Wahine, of course, a woman, and Tāne, a man. I'm going to give you one other quick greeting for this morning, which is tēnā koe. Tēnā koe is a formal greeting in Te Reo Māori, in the Māori language. When you see somebody for the very first time, or if you meet them for the very first time, the appropriate greeting is tēnā koe. There you are. There you are. Tēnā, there, whai you, koe. So very simple, tēnā koe. Kia ora is a less formal greeting, or an informal greeting. When you hear some of our speakers and you really appreciate what they're saying, you just have to say kia ora. Kia ora is really a sign of support or tautoko, and it's an informal way of saying hello to somebody. But for the very first time, you've met somebody, tēnā koe is the appropriate kōrero. Okay, looks like we're nearly ready to go. Once again, here is a hashtag. It's the last time I'm going to put this up, and then it sits down on the TV in front of me, which is good. A couple of other reminders before we get started. Te Wānanga o Raukawa has 10 guiding principles for kaupapa. Now, those kaupapa are in place to harness our vitality, to protect our mana, our integrity, and to make sure that we can all reach the aspirations that each and every one of us have. So one of those kaupapa that we have is that we promote the notion of hauora, or being healthy. Now, that's a really important kaupapa here at the Wānanga. And in fact, that's why Ngā Purapura, which is this building that you're in today, has been established. One of our kaupapa is that we promote healthy lifestyles. So if anybody does participate in smoking, our kaupapa or our tikanga here at Te Wānanga o Raukawa is that you do that out of the visibility of our young people and also our old people. So if you do need to go outside for a cigarette, well, our first thing to say is, have a go at giving up. And if it's really tough, the second thing to say is, please try and go to a place where our people can't see you. All of the evidence that we have tells us that the less our kids see our people smoking, the less likely they are to start. And so that's a really good evidence base to work from. So that's one of our kaupapa. That's very, very closely connected to another one, which is that we don't promote alcohol or drugs or anything hallucinatory here at Te Wānanga, aside from karakia, of course. So this is a smoke-free hui, it's drug-free, it's alcohol-free. And we know that by doing that, it promotes mana and mauri, and it means that we can fulfill the objectives and the intent of this hui. So just some some housekeeping things here. Most importantly, have a great time. Get to know the people not only on your table, but the tables behind and around you. The greeting, of course, is tēnā koe. Tēnā koe. So if you see somebody on the table you haven't met before, the greeting is tēnā koe. We're about to start, and the curtain's coming down, which is a good sign. Once again, just to acknowledge everybody who's come from near and afar, and to reiterate the words of welcome to all of you here today from around the world, which is fantastic. So firstly, I want to acknowledge those who have travelled from afar, outside of Otaki, but in particular outside of Aotearoa, to be with us here today. It's a great honour to have so many of our Indigenous people and other supporters of Indigenous people who have travelled to Te Wānanga o Raukawa. In our whakōrero this morning, you will have heard mention of the three iwi, Te Aotearoa, Ngāti Toa Rangatira, and Ngāti Raukawa, Te Au ki te Tonga. Now the little addition there, Te Au ki te Tonga, tells us that this is the southern branch of Ngāti Raukawa. So some of you will have whakapapa connections to Ngāti Raukawa in Tokoroa, up that part of the country. There is a connection. Te Au ki te Tonga is a prefix which tells us that it's the southern branch of Ngāti Raukawa. So without any further ado, I'm putting this down. And once again, to welcome you all to this hui. It's the Pacific Regional Hui for the International Funders for Indigenous People. So I'd just like to give a big paki for our sponsors. Almighty paki. And the hui is about two things. Firstly, it's about promoting indigeneity, and all of you will be, I guess, aware of the fact that Indigenous people around the world have a massive contribution to make to the world. And it's through kaupapa like these and initiatives like these that we're able to bring so many diverse groups of Indigenous people and supporters of Indigenous people together. So the kaupapa is whakawhanaungatanga. It comes from the word whānau, getting to know one another, understanding where people come from, understanding what their kaupapa is, and understanding how we might find some common ground to work together. So all of our speakers will come here today and tomorrow are contributing to that kaupapa of whakawhanaungatanga. They bring with them a massive depth of expertise in mātauranga, which is knowledge, and maramatanga, and we're very, very fortunate that they're able to be here with us at this point to share their knowledge with you. So without any further ado, I'm going to announce our first kai kōrero, somebody who needs no introduction. Koe anō kei te piri te kei o taku waka ki te whakamārama mai i te whātau kai kōrero tuatahi. Koe tonu te tunuaki o te wānanga o Raukawa, no Ngāti Whare Raukawa anō hoki, Ngāti Raukawa Te Au ki te Tonga. O tana mahi, he kōkiri te ara, hei whaipaitanga, mā tēnā o tātou. So our first kai kōrero this morning is Miriana Selby. In addition to being the tūmaki running Te Wānanga o Raukawa, which she's done for nearly 10 years now, Miriana also holds a number of other positions, most recently a position as the co-chair on Te Mātāwai, which is a new body which has been established to promote the revitalisation of te reo Māori across the length and breadth of Aotearoa. Miriana also is an integral part of Te Hono ki Raukawa, which is a combination of iwi from this part of the North Island who are tasked with the challenge of working out the treaty settlement for our iwi here in the south. Miriana has a long background in education, Māori education in particular, a strong interest in te reo Māori, and has been an active champion of the promotion of te reo Māori within our iwi and across kura and whare kura right throughout Aotearoa. She's been in charge of what I would call a transformative part of the history of our iwi, but also our wānanga. And for those of you who have come back today, Netana, it's good to see you. You mentioned in your kōrero how much this place has changed, and I agree with that. And it's largely been under Miriana's watch in the last few years. So without any further ado, e te iwi, ko mai te pakipaki, ko Miriana Selby.
Tēnā koutou katoa, te tahi ake tautoko ane ngā mihi, ko huraina ki ringe ki a koutou i tēnei ata, tō tātou kōwhiri. Tautoko hara mai tawhiti, ngā iwi take, ngā kanohi, whakakanohi kano ngā iwi take o te ao, e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa. Tai atua ana ki ngā kanohi no tata, e mihi ana ki a koutou ko whai wāru, ki te whakawātia mai a koutou i tēnei rangi i rua, kia manaaki te karanga o te wānanga o Raukawa, o tira o ngā iwi o te toru o te rohe nei, kia huitahi mai ki konei ki te wānanga o Raukawa. Nā reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Maihana, for your introduction, and a really big warm welcome to Te Wānanga o Raukawa, to all of you. We consider ourselves very fortunate to be hosting this conference in these couple of days and appreciate that you've responded positively to our invitation. The idea of hang on, just going to get myself sorted out with this technology up here. Here we go. It's entirely appropriate that you are coming to us at this time of the year, and for those of you from the Northern Hemisphere, it is actually autumn, the fall. Some of you will know that, you'll be feeling it right now, but it's quite appropriate for you to come here at this time of the year. One of our proverbs tells us, ko ngā tangata tahi, ngā huru puta noa, that this is the time of the year we traditionally, typically in the springtime, very few people arrive, but in autumn, the masses arrive because that's when harvest time is. And so you shouldn't suffer from hunger pains while you're here. And if you do, you haven't looked after you well enough. But the idea of our small town in Tawana being a host venue for an international gathering such as this here today seemed remote until a few years ago when a delegation supported by the J.R. Mackenzie Trust made the journey to New York City to attend an IFIP conference there. We took the opportunity to extend an invitation to IFIP delegates to make the South Pacific the venue for a future conference and to allow us to return the hospitality extended to us at that time. What a great thrill to hear that our invitation had been accepted, and here you are today. You'll have noticed that your venue and your hosts are a far cry from the Big Apple. But be assured that we are grateful for the long distances that have been travelled to be here and excited by the opportunities that the conference presents. Traditionally speaking, it is a good time for you to be here. The themes of the conference thoroughly resonate with those matters high on the agenda for Māori. Climate change, fresh clean water, food sovereignty, education, traditional knowledge, and Indigenous development are some of the key commonalities that give meaning to the descriptor of Indigenous communities as people of the land. So welcome to the people of this land, in particular to the three tribes that established this organisation, Te Atiawa, Ngāti Raukawa and Ngāti Tuarangatira. Te Wānanga o Raukawa was established to provide a place for us, of us, by us, about us, that would safeguard our traditional knowledge and develop us as Māori. Te Wānanga o Raukawa is a big part of the Ōtaki story, which I want to share with you today. The key reason as to why the invitation to come to Ōtaki was extended is that there has been something of a miraculous re-imaging occurred in this town over the last 40 years. The change has come about as the result of a plan led by the Māori community. The impacts of that plan have probably crept up on the community, initially fairly gradually, such that it is true to say that the non-Māori community and many of Māori residents of this town did not see the change coming and were probably oblivious to it for most of the time. They know it's here now though. So I'd like to tell you the story of Otaki and what this town was and what it is now, with some thought about what it could be in the future. And whereas the story of Indigenous languages and cultures is often one of struggle and loss, the Otaki story is about a community that reawakened belief in itself and organised itself for better things. It's a good story. This community is something of an enigma. It has reversed the downward trajectory that language use was on, and quite dramatically so. The impact has been far-reaching and gone well beyond just language revitalisation to people revitalisation. This includes the emergence of a Māori tertiary education provider where you are right now, called Te Wānanga Ōrākava. This region is the home of 3 tribes, Te Ateo, Ngāti Okua and Ngāti Rangatira, who migrated here in the 1820s and have engaged in a number of joint projects since. Their relationship has given rise to them being known as the Art Confederation. At the time they settled here, we can be sure of saying this about them in the 1820s. They were truly people of the land, with their culture and language fully intact. They were truly Māori. The following decades, with rapidly increasing arrivals of settlers, saw that change. By the beginning of the 20th century, Māori were a minority people, the language in decline, and issues of physical survival are reality. We all know about the impact of colonisation, diminishment of land, language resources, cultural knowledge and protocols, religion, economic, social and political structures, all on the decline, and a people in crisis. That decline was rapid and comprehensive in this region. Colonisation successfully convinced many Māori of the superiority of the settlers, the lack of value or relevance of Māori language and culture, and importantly, convinced Māori not to believe in ourselves. Otaki was not immune to its effects. Māori in this region and in Otaki showed all the signs of oppression, language and culture loss, poor health and education statistics, low socioeconomic status, and no sign of reversing a long-running downward trend. It's often difficult to put your finger on or find a specific piece of data that gives an accurate measure of how bad is. However, for our 3 tribes, this was confirmed by way of a survey done in 1975, which revealed that there was no one under the age of 30 who could speak our language. The magnitude of the demise was then indisputable. We were hurtling towards language loss with 2 generations, children and their parents, registering no language capacity. Close on the heel of language loss would be the disappearance of the Māori mind that could think, process and respond from a Māori worldview, meaning that potentially all we may be left with that was Māori was our DNA. And to add insult to injury, the real possibility that our 3 tribes may take the unenviable title of being the first Māori tribes to be language dead. Then, in 1975, a tribal development plan was launched. The plan focused on the 3 tribes. It was a 25-year plan called Generation 2000. It set out to span a generation deemed to be 25 years to land at the beginning of the new millennium in much better shape than was the 1975 reality. It aimed to produce a new look generation of Māori, one version much stronger than the previous. The plan's architect, Professor Whatarangi Winiata, an accountant and academic who had spent considerable time studying in North America, had come home and been distressed to see the state of his people. With the support of the 3 tribes, the plan got underway. It was underpinned by 4 principles. Firstly, our people are our wealth. Secondly, the marae, and many of you will be familiar with our our institution, the marae, our traditional gathering places, as our principal, PAL, home. The language is a treasure, and we must control our own affairs, self-determination. Giving effect to the strategies of the plan relied on goodwill and voluntary effort of many from within the Web3 tribes and others who also contributed generously. Over time and from small beginnings, traction started to be gained. One of the most significant achievements was the establishment of our own tribal centre for higher learning, a Māori university based here in Otaki, where you are right now, Te Wānanga Ōraukawa, the first modern day wānanga to offer degree level study. With 2 inaugural enrollees, no funding, no buildings, no resources and no formal recognition, observers could be forgiven for feeling sceptical about its future prospects. Probably the fact that Te Wānanga Ōraukawa made it into the Guinness Book of Records as the smallest university in the world did not engender a great deal of optimism either. But here we are today, offering a range of undergraduate and postgraduate nationally accredited degrees to more than 3,500 students each year who come from all over the country. And of course, we're able to host this conference in a facility this town could not have dreamed about only a generation ago. The Tribal Development Plan focused on developing our people. Soon after Te Wānanga Ōraukawa got underway, Māori medium childhood centres, schools, secondary schools all began to emerge. All of these models were initiated and led by Māori, many of them graduates of Te Wānanga Ōraukawa. So throughout the 80s and 90s, Māori education initiatives took quite an extraordinary hold on the Otaki township. Gradually, many Māori parents came to see that Māori medium models were producing Māori-speaking children and that the children were not disadvantaged. In fact, they were bilingual, bicultural, with no confusion about identity. Further, these schools were producing much better education results for Māori children than were the state schools. The demand for Māori medium schools grew quickly, as did positive energy and affirmation for the Māori language. The tide started to turn with regard to the status and profile of our language and culture. Fundamental to rebuilding language and cultural competency was recognising and affirming the potential of our own people, that is, looking to ourselves for the answers and building capacity within. From a dire situation in 1975, with no one under 30 who could speak Māori, the 2013 National Census provides data that shows that 50% of the Māori population in Otaki can now speak our language. To put this in context, the national figure in 2013 for all Māori was 21% and on a downward trajectory. Otaki is on the incline. The bulk of Māori speakers is now in the under 30s, the very group that recorded zilch in 1975. And so other than the statistics, what are the other visible signs that progress has been made? There have been other self-correcting mechanisms. Otaki is now a very different town. There's a proliferation of Māori education models that has created a healthy competition. There are debates now had by young parents about the merits of the various education models Māori education models on offer. Parents have the dilemma of trying to decide which Māori medium early childhood model to go to, which Māori medium school to send their children to. A quandary not yet experienced in much larger communities or indeed in our larger cities. There's been a positive economic impact. Māori education is by far the biggest employer and single contributor to the local economy and provides, one you might argue, the economic base for the Otaki township. There's visible public affirmation. Māori signage can be seen on shop frontages inside some shops and around the town. Dramatic wider community growth benefiting all. In 2012, Te Wānanga Ōraukawa invested $10 million into this building, an Institute for Māori Lifestyle Advancement, that, while it focuses on promoting good health for Māori, is enjoyed by the whole community. There's been an intergenerational language impact. There's now a generation of adults living in Otaki, some of whom are parents themselves now, whose compulsory education, primary and secondary schooling, has all been through the medium of Māori language. Their children, a second generation being raised with Māori as their first language, are coming through the Māori early childhood and primary schools. So they've grown up in a community where Māori language and cultural behaviour is the norm. They're distinctly different from those educated through the state system. There's been a return of the Māori language to the public domain. Conversations in the Māori language can be heard in and around the township daily. Unlike other communities in New Zealand, it attracts no negativity from bystanders, shopkeepers and so on. Speaking Māori, particularly in public, has been renormalised. Sharing the language of non-Māori. Māori language greetings are widely known and accepted to the extent that non-Māori people not only respond to a Māori greeting in Māori, it is not unusual for them to initiate an exchange with a Māori greeting. And Māori words and phrases are inserted into everyday English utterances on a regular basis. Terms like manaakitanga for hospitality and generosity, kotahitanga for unity are commonly heard words. Māori ceremony and custom are a common occurrence. Many organisations seek the inclusion of Māori ceremony for occasions such as openings of buildings, welcoming staff, and so on. And of course, the significant increase in speakers of the language registering that half of Māori in Otaki can speak the language in 2013 on an upward trajectory, which means we can confidently say to Māori people in Otaki now, if you're Māori and you can't speak Māori, you're in the minority. That was something we couldn't have imagined doing a generation ago. Great outcome. As more languages heard and cultural practices are revived, acceptance grows, tensions reduce, and relationships improve. Interestingly, the level of paranoia and resistance has reduced correspondingly with the increase in the use and visibility of language and culture not seen as a threat. Otaki has developed into something of a Māori language and culture sanctuary in comparison to the town it was in 1975. So other factors that have assisted in our transformation, well, one thing is that we're a bit of a one iwi town, a one tribe town here, unlike other communities where you've got several tribes holding tangata whenua or people of the land status in the town. This town is Ngāti Raukawa tribal territory, and so there's only one boss, if you get what I mean. Our Māori Centre for Higher Learning Te Wānanga has done its job over the years in developing the capacity of our people and educating our people. Made a massive contribution in that way, and also I think the fact that Te Wānanga pitches its contribution, its offerings at degree and postgraduate, undergraduate and postgraduate degree level rather than at lower certificate level means that the development, the people development has been marked. And in getting there, we have to convince our people, some of them, that they have got what it takes, because there's been a very good, very successful experience in state schools to convince most of our people that they haven't got what it takes. Our place says you can do whatever you like, come to us and we'll help you get there. But there's absolutely no way we'll accept can't do or haven't got the goods. We found that children are the most effective marketers of the language. The quality and success of Māori medium and early childhood models was seen as the distinctiveness of the first wave of children who emerged fluent in the Māori language, competent exponents of Māori cultural practices, thoroughly at ease with who they were as Māori, and without the baggage of those denied their language and culture from their birth. This group became the envy of others from their peers to their parents and grandparents. Interest in these models grew quickly, with more and more families opting to follow the first wave. This increase in demand gave rise to a second Māori medium school. We're only a 6,000 people town and we have 2 Māori medium schools here. The product of all this effort is not monolingualism, it's bilingualism. It's an additive model. And although educated in the Māori language, our children are bilingual, such as the influence of the environment, that even though they're only allowed to speak Māori when they are at school, they are emerging bilingually. What was clear was that in order for children to be fluent, the education space had to be a Māori language domain that would serve to overcompensate for the powerful influence of nearly everything else in the children's lives. A solid infrastructure emerged around the plan. Support on a tribal level was important, absolutely essential, and that was achieved. Crown agencies undertaking compliance assessments have met with tribal scrutiny when entering Māori spaces here. This is not to suggest that our tribal structures for accountability. The concern is more around the relevance of measures and competency of measurers that come in from the Crown. In principle though, compliance is required by the Crown are never as meaningful or important as are the accountabilities to our own tribes. Satisfying the Crown means nothing if the tribe is not happy. The location we were geographically situated in Otaki here is actually in the midpoint of the confederation of the three tribes, and I think that that's helped with what we've achieved as well. It's also true that good vibrations attract positivity, and it appears that Otaki has become a place that gives off good vibes for Māori. Māori students that come to Wānanga often comment on feeling positive vibes in Otaki. Not only the wānanga, but the community is supportive, and Māori has been affirmed in many ways. And we've been able to define and claim spaces as language hotspots. Otaki is seen as something of a Māori language domain. And I might just add that this year we've got moved to have part of Te Wānanga campus a Māori only speaking zone. But really it's all about the children, and the effect of the strong focus on children has been a positive. They require and absorb the language without the pain or effort that those of us that learn language as adults have. And it's usually them that tip the scale of any scepticism when they are observed as behaving as children do, but with all the competencies that those of us of the previous generation could only dream about. There's no emotional baggage. Important too, and part of the theme of the conference is the relinking of our people with their natural environment. Within the reawakening that has occurred is a reconnection with the physical environment, something seriously compromised during the years the tribes were in decline. This relationship with one's physical environment is a distinctive element common to Indigenous peoples globally, recognised, as I said before, as people of the land. The highlighting of environmental reference points is a very powerful connector for Māori, a natural thing for Māori to identify and introduce themselves by way of both genealogical and geographical reference points. Must also say that the work that's been done here and the efforts have been Māori designed, built and controlled, and that is absolutely essential if we're to make progress. We are actually, I was going to say, as arrogant as to think in Otaki that we know best what's best for us. And it's so important that we have full control of anything that is done to working towards advancing our development as a people. It's important to have a plan, and coming from a teaching background, that's so essential to the start of every day. But the Whakatupuna Ruamana, or Generation 2000 plan, launched in 1975, was definitely the catalyst to the work that has been done, and very much more was achieved actually than that plan envisaged, which is a testimony to how good the plan was. It was embraced by senior elders within the tribes who was captured by the thinking, the vision, the heart and the tenacity of the architect. We do have work-ons, we're not there, remember, we're only halfway there, we've got work-ons. We need, the work-ons. We need our people to keep the momentum going. We need language to be spoken at home, and people make our own people make that commitment so the language isn't just carried by the schools. And we need a passion around that. We need that passion to continue. The current crop of speakers of the language who grew up speaking the language from that last generation, and there are one or two sitting in the room here, and others, need to keep the momentum going. That is, it can't be a one generation wonder, all of this work. They need that, we're relying on them to keep next generation, to go through into the next generation and keep this going. The answer definitely is to continue to focus on the children because of how the effortlessness with which they can acquire language. And we must not reinstate monolingualism. There's a message there also to take care of our environment. We need to challenge the apathy, encourage the connects and reconnects with our land. It's our birthright. We need to strive for accuracy and quality in our language, and we're in a period now where there's a lot of focus on that. Fluency has been achieved very, very well. It's now time to take our language to another level of complexity and quality. Education is power, and the Māori education models from early childhood to tertiary wānanga must be maintained and strengthened, and we must resist Crown surveillance and intrusion. And we must encourage our young people to be discerning and strategic when choosing life partners. I've offered to do it for my own children. They're all in their 20s now, 5 of them. They think I'm joking and I'm not, but they're still not listening to me. But I think that our children, we've put a lot of effort into the last generation to raise a Māori-speaking generation of children and young adults, and now they need to be really careful about not letting the love bug get too carried away and choosing very strategically so that this momentum carries on to the next generation. Nearly there. So what have we achieved? We've achieved our model. It's not the model, it's our model, and it's been very much about ourselves here and our people. We've been able to turn a pioneer spirit and personal sacrifice and gritty determination and belief in dreams into reality. We've been able to absorb criticism. We have exercised calculated defiance, thorough selflessness at times, and a focus on reinstating that which was let go by our ancestors for us, and now we're getting it back. The level of momentum that has been achieved in a largely redneck community, which Ōtaki is quite extraordinary. It was no time for the faint-hearted, but we're pleased that we've got through that period. So the last 40 years has seen Ōtaki develop into something of a Māori language and culture safe harbour. We go back over the last sort of 100 years. We would say that in 1915 all of our people could speak Māori. By 1975 we knew that nobody under the age of 30 in Ōtaki could speak Māori. By 2013 we've clawed back 50%. And just recently, we are told by the Minister of Māori Development that Ōtaki is to be named the first bilingual town in New Zealand. External affirmation. And so finally, just to say that language has the most influence in shaping the mind. Language and thought are indivisibly interwoven. The ability to not only communicate in one's native tongue, but to think within that cultural framework is a basic human right, That, when reclaimed, is extraordinarily empowering. It's through focusing on competency in the language that the path is set for our people to once again see the world through Māori eyes. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Tēnā koe, Miriana, nau nei whakatakoto te iho whakaro hei wānanga matata I tēnei rā. Nō reire, tēnei homai no te pakipaki, mo Dr. Miriana Shari. Some really, really important ideas and concepts have been laid down today by Miriana, and in particular the tribal experiment, Whakatupiranga Ruamano, perhaps provides I guess an exemplar model of how you can go about restoring language within the community. So for those of you who want to find out a bit more about the kaupapa that Miriana has spoken on this morning, at the back of the whare here, you'll see this book, which is called Whakatupiranga Mātauranga, so it's for sale. So before you go home tomorrow, do make an effort to have a read through this book, and hopefully you'll purchase a copy and support the kaupapa. But once again, thank you, Miriana, for providing a context for this hui today. I think there'll be a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time right now to hand out questions to the floor. But please, if you do have any partai, anything to talk to Miriana about today or tomorrow, feel free to do that. We're going to move right on now to our next segment for this morning, which is to ask our representatives, Dr. Lourdes Inga and Manaia King from J.R. McKenzie Trust, and also from the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples to come up onto the stage now. They're going to just provide some more context about the work that they do, as well as introducing our second guest speaker, for this morning, who is Dr. Rhys Jones. I quickly got onto Twitter before, and Rhys was our first Twitterer. So, kapai Rhys, your prize is to come up and then give a kōrero and a license in about 5 minutes' time. But I'd like to now introduce Lourdes and Manaia, who are both here today. Ka huri te rākau kia kōrero. Tēnā kōrero, hō mai anō te pakipaki.
Well, hello, good morning. It is really a truly great honor to be here amongst all of you. I wanted to thank you for giving us the space to come and for being also with us as we embark on these 2 days of conversations and engagement. My name is Lourdes Inga. I am the Interim Executive Director of the International Founders for Indigenous Peoples. On behalf of IFIP, I would like to welcome all of you to the Pacific Regional Yui and to the beautiful Otaki. It is really a humbling feeling. I was talking with someone after the breakfast about what a great moment it is, and really taking the moment to take it all in and appreciate each one of you for coming and making the journeys that you have done, for those of you that have come from close and far. During our time together, as you might have seen in the program, we have a wonderful range of different important and crucial topics for Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities. We have sessions from health, from education, as we just heard, and the importance of education to continuing identity and culture, to topics around food sovereignty and climate change. We will also hear from young leaders on the intergenerational leadership development, and from philanthropists on engaging with Indigenous peoples. I also want to take a moment to say to our gracious host that Te Wananga Orokoa, the Otaki community, who have really opened their arms and welcomed us, and to our partner, the J.R. McKenzie Trust, for thanking them for really the months of planning and dedication that it took to bring all of you here, and to celebrate the moment with them after many months of dreaming and envisioning and thinking what this moment now would be like. I would like to invite all of you to come to this gathering with open hearts and open minds, to really embrace each other's ideas, experiences, and struggles. This will be a moment where we are here to learn from one another, to really celebrate also each other's achievements and work and life experiences. I also want to address, for those of you that will be following us on social media, we welcome you to this space via virtual space. As you might know, IFIP is an affinity group of founders that are working in partnership and accompanying Indigenous peoples. And we hope that really these next 2 days and beyond, you will continue to practice as IFIP's key values as are known, the 4 R's of Indigenous philanthropy. And that is respect, reciprocity, responsibility, and relationships. Respect for new ideas and perspectives different from our own. Reciprocity, meaning being ready in these next 2 days and beyond, and being ready not exchanging ideas as it is in the giving and the receiving that we can deepen conversations. Also responsibility, being accountable on each of our roles as mothers, as wives, as husbands, as professionals, as members of this global community to continue and carry the conversations that are happening here, and to also to continue to take actions forward. In relationships, we welcome all of you to meet and make new friendships, to renew your friendships, and to carry also the conversations. As IFIP renew this energy looks at a vision of working forward, we are committed to carry conversations like this around the different regions of the world, and to also work closer with those that are in philanthropy to really carry the conversation in a way that also ensures that those that are working in philanthropy understand what it actually means to partner and accompany the life plans of Indigenous peoples, and most importantly, Indigenous rights. So with that, I want to thank you very much for coming and really acknowledging coming to listen, to learn, and to engage in support of Indigenous people's rights. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nanaya, who will be also addressing you. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā te whate pō, te whate ao. Nōrangi tūko koe, nōrangi tūko au ti hei ki te whai au ki te amarana ti hei maurio. Thank you, Lourdes. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Lourdes and her role as the Executive Director of IFIP, so the Interim Executive Director. Without her leadership, this particularly, combined with the leadership that the J. McKenzie Trust provided, may not have happened. But I want to also acknowledge the role that Miriam and Rachel and also Anthony Royal played in bringing this hui to Aotearoa New Zealand. We had this bold idea that we would just get up and pitch this regional hui in New York, and we had a really solid platform. We spoke to the development that we were seeing right across Aotearoa New Zealand, and that this was a great example of Indigenous-led development, and that we wanted to showcase this work to our IFIP global partners, but also just to the world. And these regional summits play that particular role that allows us to have conversations with other donors to understand how to better partner with Indigenous peoples. We have quite a bit of work to do in that space, but as attendees of summits like yourselves, you now are ambassadors in that regard. The JMcKenzie Trust has been, for the last 10 years now, focused on trying to improve Indigenous philanthropic engagement with Indigenous peoples. And this particular summit is part of that strategic approach. We are very proud of the work that we have done at the JMcKenzie Trust, and we will continue to do that, and that is to try and strengthen and improve the understanding of our philanthropic partners in terms of how you engage better with Indigenous peoples, both here in Aotearoa, but also around the world. So I want to welcome you all to this IFIP regional hui in Otaki, and also like to acknowledge the wānanga for hosting us in this fantastic venue, and also the township of Otaki. I mean, I've been to Otaki many times, and I love this place. So, and it's possibly because of the work that the wānanga has done in terms of improving its overall outlook. So, thanks to the wānanga for that. This marks the first time that IFIP have been in the Pacific. We are quite proud of that fact that we're able to bring IFIP to the Pacific to bring together a dynamic group of organisations, leaders, donors, academics, to have a conversation around how best to fund Indigenous peoples from a philanthropic perspective. We in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I guess our story is that we're quite heavily dependent on Crown funding, and one of the aims that we have in the philanthropic sector is to try and get more sustainability, more viability to Māori organisations in particular, so that they are not reliant on the Crown dollar. So being part of an international organisation like IFIP has seen that aspiration come to bear in terms of the work that we do at JMcKenzie Trust. So the conference theme is remembering our past, reclaiming our future resilience, climate change, and Indigenous practices for sustainability. I mean, that's quite a lot, but I mean, to be frank, we have so much to talk about that it's quite difficult to kind of break it down into one theme. So we went with this very broad theme, but you will see throughout the program that there's a lot of very interesting topics here that people will be able to passionately talk about. So these meetings offer opportunities to build relationships. They offer an opportunity for us to learn from each other. They offer us an ability to collaborate with each other. But mostly it offers also, from my perspective, an opportunity for us to go out at the end of this conference to have these very discussions with others who we believe should be more informed in terms of how we engage with Indigenous peoples from a philanthropic point of view. So I'd like to also extend the thanks to the organising committee. Without the work that they have been doing over the last year, we wouldn't be here today. And I'd also like to acknowledge the JMcKenzie Trust. So I have the privilege of being both on the board of IFIP and also on the board of the JMcKenzie Trust, and so I get to bring both our perspectives together. And it's been an absolute privilege to be part of both organisations, to see this particular hui come to Aotearoa, New Zealand, but also to see that the work that we are doing at JMcKenzie is being validated by IFIP, given that we were awarded the Indigenous Funds for Indigenous Peoples Award in 2014. So I'd like to acknowledge my fellow board members of the JMcKenzie Trust for being very bold, for being brave, and taking the direction that it has taken by making Māori development as one of its key funding priorities. So with that in mind, I just would like to welcome you all once again to enjoy this fantastic opportunity to live with each other, to talk, to share ideas, and to just enjoy the wānanga and Otaki. And I hope you've all signed up for one of those the site visits. There are 10, so I'm not sure how you're going to juggle which one to go to, because they all look pretty fantastic to me. So please enjoy yourself, and I do hope that you do learn something new about the world of philanthropy and how philanthropy and Indigenous development can come together as one for the mutual benefit of supporting Indigenous development. I now have the pleasure of introducing your first keynote speaker. So it's Dr. Reece Jones, who is with us just on the tab down below. For many of you who don't know Reece is a Māori public health physician. And I don't know if many of you know that Māori public health physicians are very rare. So he has, I guess, a very busy role in terms of being both an academic but also a Māori public health physician. I'd like to now just bring Chris up. He is, whilst he's a public health physician, he also has a special interest in climate and environmental health, and so his keynote will be regarding that particular topic. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rhys Jones.
Tēnā koe mai, kia ora tātou, koe mihi nunui ki ngā iwi e toru o tēnei rohe, te ati awa, ati tō rangatira, Ngāti Raukawa, te au ki tonga, karanga mai, mihi mai. Tēnā anō hoki koutou e te hau kainga, te wānanga o Raukawa, tēnei te mihi nunui kia koutou hoki. I ngā kai whakahaere o tēnei hui, tēnei te mihi nunui mo te karanga mai, ki te tai mai, ki te whakawhiti kōrero I wainui a tātou. He hono re tino nui tērā, anō re kei te mihi, Koutou hoki kua tai mai, mō ngā hau e whā, tēnā koutou kia ora tātou. Tēnei au e tuaki nei, he uru o Ngāti Kahungunu, tuau ki te maunga o whakapūnake, huri aku titiro ki ngā wai o te rohe o Wairoa, te Wairoa hoku pū ho nengi matangi rau te awa, e rere atu ki te moana nui a kiwa. Anō rere kia koutou no te moana nui a kiwa, koutou hoki ngā iwi taki o te ao, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou. Thank you very much. It's a great honour and a privilege to be here, and so thank you very much for the invitation to talk. Manaya said that we might learn something about philanthropy. I'm certainly hoping to, because I know nothing at all about philanthropy, and I'm just a humble doctor, and I'm keen to learn. So kia ora. Yeah, and I guess my story, I come from Ngāti Kahungunu, a place on the east coast of the North Island here in Aotearoa. I grew up down in Hawke's Bay, came into, into this area through medicine. So I did study medicine up in Auckland, and eventually got to a point where I couldn't see the point of carrying on with, I was working in South Auckland, which for those of you who aren't from here may not know is a very deprived part of Auckland. Working in paediatrics and just seeing lots of Māori and Pacific kids coming in with clearly preventable health conditions, and got me to thinking there has to be a better way of trying to address these problems. And being probably quite young and idealistic at the time, I decided to go into public health medicine and looking at what can we do to try and address the conditions that are contributing to poor health, to try and promote health. And I don't know if we've achieved much, but it seems to me that we're working in a better space than just the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And that got me into thinking about environmental determinants of health, and so those things in the environment that contribute to either making us healthy or not. And that's led me to really engage with this idea of climate change and the links between climate change and health, which I think are incredibly important. And particularly now, I think having kids, I've got 3 young boys, kind of just reinforces that and makes that even more critical. And so I'm hoping to share just some thoughts with you about climate change and about particularly what I'm going to talk about is how effectively I see climate change as just another chapter in this ongoing saga of colonisation, right? And so if we want to do something about that, we need a decolonising approach, and we need to invest in ways that are going to undo or dismantle the systems and structures of colonisation that have contributed to not just to climate change, but also to the situation we find ourselves in as Indigenous peoples, of bearing the brunt of the effects of climate change, and also being in the position of not being able to adapt because of a number of different issues. So I'm really pleased to be here at Te Wānanga o Raukawa. I'm utterly embarrassed to say I've never been here before, so I look forward to picking up on some of the good vibes. I work at the University of Auckland in Te Kupinga Hauora Māori, which is the Department of Māori Health. And I have to say, in our institution, just between you and me, in our institution, it's not always good vibes. It's not always a good, positive and uplifting, mana enhancing place to be Māori. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to come and share some time with you. Okay, should get on to my slides. I think the point I come at this from is from as a health professional, and really seeing climate change as the defining health issue of our generation, and particularly the next century. It's been recognised as such by some of the world's leading health authorities and medical journals, etc. And really, when we think, a lot of people will then question, what's climate change got to do with health? Surely that's about doctors and nurses fixing people. Climate change is about the environment and polar bears and stuff like that. We see enormous and clear connections between environmental change caused by climate change leading on to health outcomes through a number of different pathways. And so we've got some more direct things and obvious things like extreme weather events, serious heat waves causing health outcomes, but also much more indirect things, and you'll see some of those depicted on the slide here, thinking about change in disease patterns, such as mosquito-borne illnesses that have become more common, like everybody's seeing here in Aotearoa, leading on into food and water insecurity, and all the health problems that arise from scarce resources, conflict, all sorts of things, forced migration. This won't be news to too many people. So how do we get ourselves into this pickle? I think most people will be fairly familiar with the reasons behind climate change, but effectively, it is about our economy. It is about the way we rely on burning of fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions contributing to a warming of the planet with lots and lots of different impacts. And when we think about that, those impacts are not born equally. And in fact, the contribution to climate change is certainly not equal. And so we see in this kind of distorted view of the map of the world, those countries that have contributed most to greenhouse gas emissions, to climate change, blowing up. So you see there, Europe, the United States, in particular, really disproportionately represented. You can hardly even see continents like Africa and some of the poorer areas of the world because they've hardly contributed at all to climate change. And yet, when you look at what the impacts are going to be, and this graph shows expected deaths from certain conditions related to climate change, you'll see the impacts are pretty much, all borne by the countries in the poorest parts of the world, Africa, Indian subcontinent, etc. Those that have contributed least to climate change. And so you've got this real moral crisis going on. And in fact, if you could show it, Indigenous peoples would be in here as well as being the hardest hit by climate change without having really done anything much to contribute. And so this is why I like to talk about climate change as really as an intensification of the process of colonisation. It's really, in a way, nothing new to us as Indigenous peoples. It's colonisation in its latest sort of guise. And this is one of the ways I like to think about colonisation is colonisers thinking they know best and thinking they've got all the solutions, when, as I'll talk about today, we have the solutions, and Indigenous peoples have an enormous contribution to make, not just in addressing the climate change issues for ourselves, but in a global context. Because one of my key messages here is that colonisation and climate change are really strongly interlinked. Okay, so the process required to get to the situation we are today required confiscation and appropriation of land and other resources, led on into modern capitalism, which required energy in the form of fossil fuels, leading to industrialization, leading on into the situation we have here today with situations like land being taken for mining, resulting in huge problems with climate change. Okay, and so these things are very clearly linked. And so in New Zealand we see, as Miriam has already talked about this morning, huge loss of land, okay? And that land being taken over to, in effect, create an economy which contributes to huge greenhouse gas emissions. In many other parts of the world, it's an economy based on fossil fuels. In New Zealand here in particular, a lot of our greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture. And so that land shift, that environmental change from native forests to farmland, a huge part of that was, that was a huge driver for colonisation, but it's also been a huge driver for the kinds of environmental changes and leading on to climate change that we've seen here in Aotearoa. Okay, so these processes of colonisation are necessary to create the conditions by which we then face the effects of climate change. Myself and a group of others have undertaken some work looking at climate change from the perspective of health, and particularly from the perspective of the right to health for Māori. And this is another way that we can look at it that actually shows, again, how climate change and colonialism are linked. And so we see that the impacts of climate change on Māori health are incredibly disproportionate. Okay, greater burden of chronic disease, leading to worse health outcomes for Māori. Vulnerability because of living in poor conditions, poor housing and infrastructure, access to healthcare, things like that. These things all increase the risk. Cultural practices that expose us to greater risk because of climate change. All these things are really important in determining why Māori experience worse outcomes and are likely to experience even more disproportionate outcomes as climate change advances. Okay, and so some people will say, oh, it's just bad luck that Māori happen to live in the areas that are going to be worst affected and maybe don't have the resources. But if we look particularly historically, but also in an ongoing way, we can see that there's no coincidence there. These risk factors have been driven by the process of colonisation. So our analysis looking at climate change from a right to health perspective showed that there are really important areas where the New Zealand government's failing to meet its obligations, and it must address climate change as an urgent issue, but also without infringing on the right to health for Māori, okay, upholding Māori rights and supporting Māori with adaptation. And really importantly, as I'll go on to talk about, that this needs to be underpinned by not an ongoing reinforcement of colonisation, but an approach which allows for Māori self-determination and actually recognises and prioritises Indigenous knowledges. And also just a little aside to say that we mustn't think about colonisation as something that happened back in the day and that we're now experiencing the ongoing effects of. This is something that's our constant companion, and as Miriam has already talked about, we need to make sure that the next generation's got to be continuing this fight, because the forces massed against us aren't giving up. Okay, so we need to focus on this as an ongoing battle. And a battle it is. And it's really important that we recognise that Indigenous peoples are often And in fact, in many parts of the world, at the forefront of this battle, we tend to have the most skin in the game. We're often the first and worst affected by climate changes, as you can see in these examples. Often the ones with the least voice as well, the least ability to actually do something about it because of the political power. And so we see examples like Standing Rock, where Indigenous peoples are actually fighting the fight for all of their population. They are standing up against the forces that will not only interfere with their own lands, not only destroy their own territories and resources, but those companies and those interests that will actually contribute to climate change and destroy all of our futures. Okay, so one of the key messages that I'm trying to get across is that we all need to see this as something that's not going to be a simple fix, but something where there's going to be these battles, and it's going to come down to battles over coal mines, over pipelines, over all sorts of different resources around the world. And Indigenous peoples will be there at the forefront of those battles, and we need to be standing beside Indigenous peoples all over the world to continue this fight. Okay, so slight diversion now, just to think about what do we need to do as a global community to tackle climate change. So it really comes down to quite a simple equation in many people's mind, and that is that we have a limited amount of carbon or greenhouse gas emissions that we can emit if we want to stay within a safe level. And a lot of people talk about 2 degrees Celsius warming above pre-industrial levels as a safe level. Even that is associated with considerable risk. So we shouldn't necessarily think, oh yeah, as long as we're staying under 2 degrees, we'll be sweet. This is a situation where we actually need to be doing as much as we can, as fast as we can. Because as you can see there, we've already used up the vast majority of our carbon budget. We've only got enough for, at the present rate, another 15, 20 years or so. So we need to be doing something really, really dramatically. And when I say dramatically, I do mean this is a situation of extreme urgency. And in fact, many of the medical authorities and medical journals are referring to climate change as a medical emergency. Not because we're seeing huge catastrophic health outcomes now, but because if we don't act now, we will see those in a very short space of time. And this graph here shows that the longer we take to start acting, the more dramatic and the more radical that action is going to have to be. So you can see there that our global greenhouse gas emissions are tracking upwards over time and following on through that dotted line to show the projections. And the longer we continue on that line, the more quickly we're going to have to reduce them. So you can see that if we go to that far extreme, you've got this almost impossible kind of turning around from huge greenhouse gas emissions down to zero in a very short space of time, which seems almost impossible. So if we're going to keep to this safe limit, we need to start acting now. We need to peak greenhouse gas emissions, start trending downwards. How do we do that? Well, I mean, the conventional wisdom says that we need to transform energy from fossil fuels, from coal, oil, gas, etc., to renewable energy. From an Indigenous point of view, we might think about that in quite a different way. We might think, rather than this finite carbon budget and emissions and all these fancy ways of thinking about it, we might just actually think from an Indigenous perspective, this is about actually those relationships that we have with the natural world. For us here in Aotearoa, we often talk about ranginui, papatuanuku, and whakapapa connections back to the land, back to points of significance, cultural sites of significance. So that we don't see ourselves as separated from that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Because at the moment, what we're seeing is these continued upward trends in greenhouse gas emissions, okay? Which, if we take no action, will lead us up to 4.5 degrees warming. We don't even want to consider that. That's horrendous. That'll be an incredibly hostile environment in many, many parts of the world and result in enormous suffering and perhaps, could even be an existential threat. In other words, threaten the existence of the human populations. If we go with what's currently promised by governments, we end up with 3.5 degrees, which is okay, an improvement, but it's nothing like what we need. If we manage to improve those commitments, we'll end up down on that bottom line with just under 2 degrees warming. That, I have to say, at the moment seems unlikely, given the way we're trying to solve the problem. Why do I say it's unlikely? Partly because of this gentleman, but also because of what he represents. Clearly a denier of global warming, wanting to enact policy and put in place changes that will undermine a whole lot of the efforts that are going on, not just in America, but also globally, to address climate change. And in many ways, I see this as sort of like the ultimate conclusion of Western civilization. A situation and a leader where nothing matters except economic growth and the continued exploitation of resources to achieve that, despite all the negative outcomes. And so what I'm suggesting is that if we follow down the track of Western style approaches to climate change, which is the very system of thought that got us into the problem in the first place, we're not going to get anywhere. Because even some of the solutions to climate change that are adopted by Western nations, by some of our leaders, are incredibly detrimental to our environment. I've got an example here of a hydro dam from Panama, but this could be an example from many, many places around the world. Okay, so this is an attempt to address climate change, okay, by providing renewable energy through renewable electricity through a hydro dam. But it's gone and flooded and essentially destroyed local indigenous people's lands. We can think of a number of other examples of this, be it mining, be it dams, be it pipelines, any number of things which contribute to environmental contamination of indigenous people's lands. But this is troubling also because it shows us that even if we're trying to address climate change, it doesn't mean we're going to be doing that in a way that upholds indigenous people's rights. Okay? Colonizers are still going to colonize, whether they're trying to fix climate change or trying to make it worse. So we need to approach this from a much different perspective. And that's why I like this quote. I think this Albert Einstein, he had a lot of good things to say, and he was a bit of an expert on Māori issues and Indigenous issues, I think. He said something like that no problem can be solved within the same level of consciousness that created it. And if we think about climate change, then what's created that is this philosophy of Western civilization of seeing ourselves as superior to the natural world and removed from it. And therefore, the way we engage with that is to exploit, to take resources, to pollute. And if we're going to continue down that track of trying to fix the problem within the same level of consciousness, I'm saying that we're not going to get very far. And I think that we need to think about this as, actually, climate change is one of those things that's telling us that there's something really, really wrong with the way we're living. And I think we heard it this morning, even in the pulpit, that the world we live in is sick. Okay? the approach we're taking globally and in terms of engaging with the natural world is contributing to that. We need to turn that around. We need to hit the restart button and think about how we can address things quite differently. And that's where I come to Indigenous knowledges as what I see as part of, if not the solution to addressing climate change and a lot of the environmental impacts that we're seeing. So obviously I'm not the only person thinking this, because there's the Australians, they think they can save the world. We think we can save the world. Hopefully everyone thinks they can save the world, because we have a different way of engaging. And I think Neriana talked about it, seeing the world through Māori eyes or through Indigenous eyes. If we can actually claim that space, we can engage with these things in a much different way than is traditionally being done. It's to do with this really quite different way of engaging with the world, and I think many of you will be totally familiar with this, that Indigenous cultures pay deliberate attention to the way in which the natural world speaks to us. Whereas from a Western perspective, and I don't mean this to say that everyone who's a Westerner kind of thinks like this, but from a Western cultural perspective, we see ourselves as removed from that, and that rather than the world speaking to us and informing us, we see ourselves as being dominant and attempting to dominate the world and conquer. Okay, very, very different perspectives. And I'm not going to read out this whole quote, but I'll leave it up there. I really think this captures what we're trying to talk about here. I like the way the dust on which you now stand responds more lovingly to their footsteps than to yours, because it is rich with the blood of our ancestors. Just some of the language in there is really, really nice. Be conscious of the sympathetic touch. Okay? That very different way of and in fact, in a really visceral way of connecting with the world. And because actually, from a Māori perspective and from many other Indigenous perspectives, we see relationships between ourselves and non-human things, like the environment, like other creatures, as not different from relationships with humans. We see that interdependence, that interrelationship of our whakapapa. And so, in a Māori context, and you might have noticed that I did this morning, was to connect myself to some places where I'm from. And I used to think, you know, I grew up in a fairly mainstream, if you like, whānau. Wasn't exposed to a lot of Māori stuff growing up. And I used to think when I went along to some hui and things, and people would be introducing themselves by talking about their mountain and their river and their who knows whatever else. I used to think, what a bloody waste of time that is. You know, why don't they just tell me, oh, I'm John from Hastings or whatever. And so yes, I was pretty bad Māori, I have to say. But it's only more recently struck me that not only are those things important, they're actually critical to our ongoing survival as people. You know, if we lose those connections, if we lose those intimate connections with the natural world, we end up in a situation where we just see the earth and all its resources as commodities that we can exploit for our own good, for our own well-being. And we lose the sense of that interdependence. And we end up doing stuff like what Donald Trump wants us to do, burning lots of carbon and contributing to the problems that are going to really, really hurt us coming down the track. So, yeah, rather than this being just frivolities that people like to rattle off and say all these places where they're from and connections to this river and that lake and whatever else, this is critical stuff for our survival. Okay. Only just occurred to me not that long ago. But we see that in the way that people talk, Indigenous people. So I'm the river and the river is me. Really interesting in that, you know, the Whanganui River just recently been given sort of legal personhood. First river in the world, apparently. And, you know, non-Māori people will look at that and go, what, how can a river be a person? What if someone drowns in there, do they get taken to court and put in jail or whatever? And just don't have that understanding of the way of thinking of that as our ancestor and as something that needs to be treated as such. So yeah, really important connections. And we see these kinds of things coming through in Indigenous initiatives. And so one of the things I want to just talk about very briefly as a specific example of what I'm talking about is marae food gardens. Okay, it's one of the projects that I've been involved in my research at the University of Auckland. And it's great to see Pangapa here who worked on our project with us for a little while. Looking at marae food gardens, community food gardens on marae, and looking at not just the health benefits, but also the way in which that can contribute to reinvigoration of cultural knowledge, whakawhanaungatanga, building connections amongst people, environmental impacts, food sovereignty, which we're going to hear more about during the conference. So these things, by looking at this and by putting these things in place in an Indigenous context, we can help to address many of the factors that are contributing to some of the bad stuff we see, like climate change. Okay, these are photos from one of the marae that we've been working with, Tuanuku Ōpiri Marae in South Auckland, and shows some of their produce as well. Just doing some awesome mahi there. So what I think that we need to do in addressing climate change, but also at the same time by upholding Indigenous people's rights, is to take a decolonising approach. In other words, to look at what are those things that are contributing to the impacts of climate change, but also contributing to the marginalisation of Indigenous peoples. And we've already seen some of those things talked about this morning, about the confiscation of land, the systematic disposition of language and culture, stolen generations kind of things. All those kinds of things which actually take away those resources that we need to be able to respond to climate change and to be able to respond to lots of other things. Okay? So in our work and thinking about how we address climate change, how we address a number of the different issues for Indigenous peoples, we need to think about a way that dismantles those structures, those systems, those institutions that contribute to Māori being dispossessed of those things, and to other Indigenous peoples similarly. Okay, as I mentioned before, we need to recognise that Indigenous peoples are fighting this battle in many places around the world. That we're at the forefront of this battle, that climate change is not going to be won by the governments sitting in their negotiating rooms in the conference of the parties in climate change negotiations. It's going to be won at the local level, and every community doing its thing, every community standing up against fossil fuel exploration, oil drilling, etc., etc. And we need to be supporting those efforts by Indigenous peoples and standing alongside. So, in summary, what I've talked about today, climate change, and the way I like to think about it, is really, in a sense, nothing new for Indigenous peoples, because we've always been, since colonisation, always been exposed to the impacts of environmental change, forced migration off our lands, disposition of resources, all these sorts of things that come about in a similar way to what's happening with climate change. Furthermore, the impacts of colonisation actually stop us from doing the things that we need to do, not only to help us respond to climate change, to use our Indigenous knowledges to create the kind of change that we need to reduce our emissions, to live in a much more sustainable way, but also to adapt to the impacts of climate change, which we're going to have to do. And so taking a decolonisation or decolonising approach is the only way we're actually going to address climate change, not just the issues for Indigenous peoples, but the only way we're actually going to address climate change at a global level as well. And one really important point is that investing in Indigenous communities, Indigenous cultures, Indigenous knowledges is a really critical part of that. Okay, I believe if we're going to solve climate change, it's going to rely on Indigenous knowledges, Indigenous solutions to the problem. Those things that have been seriously repressed by the impacts of colonialism, and therefore things that we need to uncover, reinvigorate, and prioritise and support if we're going to come up with the solutions that we need at a local, national and global level to help us address climate change and to give us a future that we can at least look forward to with some hope. Morena, kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe Rhys, kua whakatakotongi e koe te wero, mā tēnā o tātou katoa te whānui nei, o reira e te iwi umai no te pakipaki, o tātou Rhys Jones. So some really important points there that Rhys has touched on, and as I said, Rhys, it's pertinent to the kaupapa of this week. And as you'll see too, I think that's the consideration of our kaiao, our environment is pertinent to us as Indigenous people as well. And that's one of our obligations, of course, is to make sure that we nurture the mauri of the land. You raised a couple of really interesting points in terms of what's happening around the world, but also here in Aotearoa. Most recently, the commodification of water is an issue for us. We know that by taking the water away from our land, the mauri of those spaces dissipates as well. So it's really good to hear the way that you've framed not only the challenges, but I think also the opportunities for us as Māori and as iwi take across the world to take up the challenge and to find a way or a pathway forward so we can preserve everything that's happened to us. So once again, kia ora. We are running slightly behind time, so we're going to go straight into our next session, and this is a panel session, and there's three kaupapa to this next section of the day. So I'm going to ask our presenters to come up, our first two presenters to make their way up to the stage. While they're doing that, I'm going to just give you a very brief overview of their kōrero. So our next two presenters are Ora Pala Tukaki, no te whānau apanui, no te kaha, Rawa tahi ko April Inga, o tōna takinga no kānata, Pacific People's Partnership. And the kōrero today really is looking at the importance of Indigenous partnerships, connecting to community and the powerful opportunities that they present. The presentation is going to include a brief of an upcoming International Indigenous Climate Gathering in Aotearoa in 2018, which isn't too far away, so a great opportunity to promote that kaupapa. I'm going to ask one of our team at the back to just put up their hand when we're about 15 minutes into the presentation. So I'll make a call now. I think what we'll do is truncate our lunch break a little bit, so we've got 1 hour for lunch, but I want to try and give our kōrero as much time as possible without cutting them off too soon. So if everyone's happy with that, I see people nodding, ka pai, kia ora. So instead of having an hour for lunch, we'll make that 45 minutes or maybe 40 minutes, and we'll give you a call once we're ready to go into our next session. So the way that we're going to run this session is, I think at the end of it, once we've got all of our presenters up, we might have some time for questions. So if you do have questions, if we get a bit of time at the end of our last group before lunch, we'll open up the floor and I'll get somebody to go around with the microphone and take some part up from the floor. So without any further ado, po mai te pakipaki, mo ora, rawa tahi ko April.
ka si ka wera ka haua ka panui he. Ngā mihi nui ko Ngāti Raukawa, rātou ko te ati awa, ko Ngāti Tuaranga Tirimoa o rātou whānau. O rātou hopu o te tangata whenua o te rātou rohi nei kia ora koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa kua tau nei ki roto o te kātou whare tifona, o whare wānanga, whare wānanga. And kia ora to all our Indigenous brothers and sisters and to our many visitors from over the sea. And kia ora to our IFIP whānau. So 1956 was a fabulous year of New Zealand firsts. It was the year that New Zealand won the cricket, its first test match victory over the West Indies. It was also, sadly, the death of Opo, the gay dolphin, not to be confused with his straight cousin Jack. It was also the year of the Springboks tour in New Zealand. And it was also the year that people declared that New Zealand had the best race relations ever, anywhere in the whole world. So 1956 was a year of New Zealand firsts. It was also the year that my father met my mother, an Englishman from South Manchester, the home of Coronation Street, met this Māori maid. That's not very well, right? And over time gave birth to 7 children. Now, back in those days, of course, any children of mixed marriages were considered not quite right. Non-existent was thinking that 2 halves made a whole. And then, ironic then, that by the 80s, everyone was trying to trace their Māori heritage to the 83. And the thinking then became that if you had mixed heritage, suddenly you had the best of both worlds. But racial descriptive blemishes aside, I guess you can say that collaboration for me started in the womb. So what does this have to do with our talk this morning? Well, April and I are here to talk about the power of collaboration. So when I think about those times and now, I'm here all around the world, I think about the collaborative power and the opportunity it presents to create a momentum of change. And I believe that there are a number of key factors that make this momentum happen. Firstly, people want to connect. Through leading and connecting, through people and ideas, we create community. We create community through coming together because of causes, common causes, through our family, through social media and the internet, through our work and networks, through our spiritual values, through the things that we volunteer for that do important and valuable services within our communities. Now, because of this community and connection, when something happens, the opportunity to create a momentum of change is caused by either one or two of these reasons, either because we feel threatened or because we are inspired. So to give an example, in 2010, the New Zealand government announced the granting of a deep sea oil drilling permit to a Brazilian company called Petrobras to seismically survey the deep seas of the east coast for oil and gas. Now, this permit came on the heels of the Deepwater Horizon explosion in the Gulf of Mexico, which killed 11 people, injured 17, and devastated an entire coastline that is still not recovered to this day. So, back in New Zealand, we had this paniwha, this sea monster, come into our waters. And there was mass outrage, particularly from our tribal areas of Ngāti Porou and Te Whānau Apunu. And from all around, friends and supporters came from afar to support us to stop the seismic surveying, which was happening in our waters. But from this threatening yet inspirational time, leadership emerged, helping to build a momentum that inspired and activated so many people. During that time, our trust, Toi Toi Manawa, was born, and we asked ourselves, what can we do to contribute to this momentum? We could see that the strength and power of this movement came from our connection to our lands, and waters and our relationships with each other. And we just wanted to find a creative way to support that action and momentum. So we decided to do festivals. We had music, we had wānanga on climate change, we had activism, traditional kai, earthship building, getting our elders to stand up and talk about what it was like in the day, visiting significant sites, and all of this with along stages where we mentored our rangatahi to perform with some of our New Zealand greats, and ran sort of composing workshops and recording workshops, and all of this to build the mana and the potential of our rangatahi, of our young people. And every time we ran an event, we had a theme that was connected to what was important in the bigger picture. So 7 festivals and untold wānanga and workshops later, our next big project is, of course, working with Pacific Peoples Partnership on a project that is international, so you're all invited. That's Indigenous, which means there'll be a lot of food. And we might even get down to some serious business like climate change and climate action. So one of the things that I believe that we are in a time of collaborative leadership, and we're using the model of, leading by example. Now, some people believe that you have to have charisma before you can become a leader, but I believe that by being a leader, you gain charisma. That's our Auntie Eddie and Uncle Danny, by the way. To be a leader of collaborative change, you also need to be prepared that you will upset people. And because you're upsetting the status quo. Now, not Jake the Mouse kind of upsetting, but the kind of upsetting that that you do what you do because you know that you must. And to be a leader of collaborative change, you must also be someone that doesn't always go by the rules. That you have the discerning ability to know when the rules apply to you and when they don't. And lastly, as a leader of collaborative change, you would know that you are part of a greater world that connects us. And your place in this world is driven by your passion, your drive, your love of your people, your lands, your waters, your belonging, and your desire to build the mana and potential of others. So April and I are sharing this little 20-minute corridor that we have with you. And I'd like to thank you just for that very short but brief introduction into the kind of magic and potential of collaboration. And I'm going to pass you over to the fabulous April from Pacific Peoples Partnership, and she's the other half cast speaker for you. Well done.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's so exciting to have the IFIP Pacific Regional Hui here in Otaki. I'm so excited for this. I've had the opportunity to go to a number of IFIP meetings in New York and also in Tofino. We hosted one on the Pacific Northwest coast there that I was really pleased to volunteer at and be part of. So it's pretty exciting to be here. I'd also like to acknowledge the amazing territories we're on and how inspired I am by everything that I've heard already about what has happened in this community for language and cultural revitalization. I just want to talk a little bit about Pacific Peoples Partnership. We've been in Canada. We're the only organization in Canada for 40 years that have been connected to the South Pacific. We're quite unique. We're the only organization, like I say, that is connected in that way. And what's central to our work is connecting Indigenous peoples north-south. The picture you can see here is it's a celebration of those connections north-south. We've brought Papua New Guinea artists up to Canada. They're from the Sepik River region. And we had 2 master carvers traveling up. And we also brought one of the first vellum weavers ever to come up to Canada as well. And when they were in Canada, we didn't just want to bring them up to meet local artists and to also come to the University of British Columbia Museum of Anthropology, where they had a major exhibition there. We also wanted to open opportunities for all kinds of sharing and collaboration. So that is typical of the work we do. We'll fundraise to bring individuals up from the South Pacific, and then we'll create really meaningful, deep programs for them to connect and learn from and contribute to and share with local Indigenous peoples in Canada. So what you see there is you see Nancy Wani, one of the first women ever from the Pacific River region to come up to Canada, meeting with Joe Martin, who is one of our Canadian, right? Yeah, we know the Joe Martin fan. Joe Martin, who is one of our master canoe makers, and he was also credited with helping to save some of the ancient rainforests in Tefino on our island there. And with some of our students, because we believe in working with youth, the youth of our future, who helped to coordinate some of these programs. But the programs went rather deep. They were also not only to animate the exhibit or to have spaces for the public to get to know these people, but they were also to share what's happening in the Pacific River community, and that they have a mine going upstream from their community fairly shortly to open probably. And what are the implications, and what are the things they can do? So working with scientists and bringing people together so that we can teach baseline training on how to monitor the health of the river so that they can hold that against the mining company, hopefully, and keep this environmental contamination or destruction at bay. But connecting peoples north-south is central to our work, and in particular with Indigenous peoples. Sorry. Culture, the sharing and celebration of diverse arts and cultural expression via public programming connects diverse communities via our hearts and imaginations, making allies and potential ambassadors. Our annual One Wave Festival typically addresses issues around climate change. However, in the year of Canada's 150th birthday, and the Year of Reconciliation in our city of Victoria, we chose to focus our One Way Festival this year on colonization, and the theme, We Are Still Here. Partnerships and working with our local Songhees Nation, and we have Marshall Islanders coming to our festival this year. So that is central to our work always, is showing those deep connections between all peoples of the Pacific, North Pacific and South Pacific. Awareness. A major barrier to our work in Canada, as you might expect, is bringing attention to the critical aspects of what's happening in the South Pacific. And it has limited airplay and also limited understanding of Pacific and Canadian Indigenous issues. Part of how we address that is working with youth, teaching youth how to create media. So you can see this program right here is called Pacific Voices Exchange. We'll bring together Indigenous youth and youth of color and diversity together to learn about how to make media, how to utilize their voice. We believe this is an important part of sharing information and knowledge, which is a really critical part of our work. We're also creating Pacific streams and innovations through live streaming and sharing in multimedia so that we can share the stories from the South and also create opportunities for dialogue utilizing innovation in media. For instance, on May 16th, we were live streaming an event called Pacific Stream, Community Narratives of Climate Change at a Canadian conference for refugees on forced migration. So we'll be featuring speakers from Borneo and Vanuatu, all remotely through the use of technology, because that's one of the issues that we found in connecting people from the North and South Pacific was limited connection and the expense of traveling. Solidarity. Divide and conquer is a strategy used against so many Indigenous peoples. And we can conquer this through solidarity and action. The West Papua Human Rights Issues has been a focus of our work for over 30 years. Jeremy, you see a young, oops, I'm the wrong one, sorry. There we go. Jeremy, the young man with the hand up in the air, he rode his bicycle over 22,000 kilometers in 2 campaigns to raise awareness for West Papua over 7 countries, over 3 years. This in part was actually sponsored by Lush, I think, which we might have someone here. And that was to raise awareness and build solidarity for West Papua. So those kind of awareness building campaigns is also part of the work that we all need to do, and it's critical. Just wanted to also mention that one of the the leaders of this movement, Benny Wenda, is also currently in New Zealand right now, and he'll be speaking at the New Zealand Parliament on May 10th. So partnerships are the very heart of what we do. We're a very small organization, and we can only do what we do when we work in partnerships with other organizations and with individuals and communities, and also the host nations of which we live upon, which is Songhees, Esquimalt, and the Coast Salish peoples. So partnerships are across sectors, disciplines, rank, privilege, and culture. They are equitable, mutually beneficial, rooted in respect and reciprocity. We work closely with elders. Elder Joan Morris, who you see there, is accepting greetings from Pash from Australia. And what we were doing at that time is the opening ceremonies of our Pacific Networking Conference, which is where we had the opportunity to get to know Aura. Our Pacific Networking Conferences are thematic, and each they're held every 2 to 3 years, and they basically are topical for the time and the critical needs of that time in life. The next one that we're doing, I'm very pleased to be saying, is happening in 2018. I like to think in the spring, but apparently it's autumn here. So next May, you can expect to see an amazing conference with my partner here, Aura, held in our territories. And so we're announcing it here today, and we have some information that's at the back table there that you'll be able to pick up. But I'd like to bring Aura up, and we can maybe just briefly tell you a little bit about the conference that we're creating together.
You can't keep a good up and nose down. So we've been talking about this for quite a while, and obviously it's not a new idea, because a lot of Indigenous people and all people around the world are very concerned about what's happening in our climate. And so probably over the last year and a half, we've been think tanking, discussing, mulling it over, how is it going to look? And it really just started with, well, why don't you just come to Whānau? You know, we've got plenty of kaiwana, plenty of seafood, we're going to have some good laughs, lots of bush, we'll take you in, we'll get you lost for a couple of days, it's a spiritual journey, and then we'll just have a big hui and talk about climate action. So it was really just one of those things, and April, being adventurous as she is, just said, yep, okay, we're coming. And so that's how really it began once we had first met. And after a lot of discussion, it was really talking about, well, our Indigenous prophecies, our Indigenous environmental science has been fundamental to our interconnectedness with the planet and with how we live, and our interdependency and how we live together. And a lot of that knowledge, though it still operates for some of us, the mass kind of manner that it used to do is not as obvious anymore. And so this summit is also about reinvigorating all of that traditional knowledge. So we're going to have traditional kai or site visits into the Ngāhere, intertwined with Western science, climate change, sort of the information that climate Western scientists give, and then also intertwined with activism, because we are not passive receivers of climate action or climate change. We will not just sit here and wait for it to happen. And so creating understandings and forms of actions that are already happening all around the world, but how do we activate ourselves and our communities on a very grassroots and local level? So for those of you that don't know Te Whānau, and shame on you, because that's the centre of Aotearoa, it's a very rural area, very traditional. It's one of the few iwi that hold a lot of the ownership of our land. So we hold about up to 97% of our whenua. When you come in, it's like you've morphed into another being. And there's, you know, from Whakatohia to our Tōrere cousins to the Whānau Apunu, we're all very related, and Tūhui. So you will be part of a bigger part of the family once you enter into our tribal area. But we're very happy to be in partnership with Pacific People's Partnership, because they're a phenomenal organisation. And we look forward to putting some gummies on them and getting there.
Thank you very much. We hope to see you there.
Whānau,
these pamphlets, you want to know a little bit more, there's stuff in the back there. Otherwise, come and grab a cup of tea and come and sit down with us. Kia ora.
Tēnā kōrua, so you heard it here first. Next year in Te Whanau Apanui Territory, I can testify to the juiciness of their kina. Probably not quite the same level as Ngāti Porou, but close enough. So thank you very much. Lots to think about, and without any further ado, I'm actually going to call up our next kai kōrero as well, who is Tamati Patuwai. So just while Tamati is coming up, I saw it there, right? While he's coming to the stage, one or two other quick things. April mentioned the power of media. We've actually got a live YouTube connection happening at the moment. So all of the kai kōrero and the presentations that you're hearing today are going out to our people around the globe, which is fantastic. Ko Tamati, i ahu mai ngā iwi rua, ko Ngāti Whātua, te kawera o Amaki. Ko tana kōrero i te rāna e hangai ana ki te mauri o te wai. Nō reira mihi kaua te Tamati te whakaro rangatira kia kōkiri tia tēnei kaupapa. The Ōmaru Creek runs through the east Auckland community of Glen Innes and is historically a treasured waterway for local iwi. However, according to recent council studies, Ōmaru is one of the unhealthiest waterways in Aotearoa. Since 2013, the community group NADAV has led a project called Ōmaru Restorative Actions, or ORA. By the way of creative cultural approaches and scientific methods, ORA has called thousands of people back to the awa to catalyse positive change. Nō reira e te iwi, o mai te pakipaki mō Tamati.
Amohia ke te ponui kia hurihia iho. Ki rua I te tipua, kia rua I te tawhito. Kia uru, kia tina, kia whena. Hara mai te toki, haumi e hui e, tai ki e. Patua te pao, tuki tuki a te pao. Makarahia ngā pekerangi ngā tukupu, ngā tuku aro o tēnei pā. Kia ui a wini wini, kia ui a wana wana. Hara mai te hau kino, te hau runa, te hau kaitaua, he toka tumu ana. Hara mai te toki, haumi e hui e, tai ki e. Tuatahi ka mihi ake ki tō tātou matua nui te rangi. Nāna I hanga tō tātou hui tēnei aka. Nō reire pā tēnā koe. Ko rātou anō hoki, ngā mareikura, ngā whatukura, ko mene ki te pō, haere, haere, haere atura. Tātangi, tātangi, tātangi. Koe anō rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou. Tēnā koutou katoa kia ora tātou. Mihi anō kia kingi tūheitia, me te kāwai āriki, e noho nei ki te tūranga waiwe Aotearoa, mō reira, pai mārire kia rātou. Kore noa kia koutou te taumata tapu, koutou rā kui mātarama. Koutou rā I tukuna I ho mai ngā taonga e whiwhinei mātou. Mōhiotanga, mōhio, ke, tēnei tinana, tēnei wairua, tēnei tirohanga, koutou rā te taumata tapu, koutou rā tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora tātou te whānau. Morning. I'm a little bit nervous. My heart is racing. So I'm going to ask for some interaction. Just to get that kind of connection from here to there. So if you may, can I ask you to stand? Not yet. I don't stand up. Stand here to tātou, not yet on the sounds. I'm going to teach you a dance move. And it's a new dance move. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. It goes like this, it's very simple. All it is the bob, okay? So it goes a little something like this. So you've got to turn kind of to the side a little bit and just look at your mates. And whatever you do, no matter how inspired you might feel, stay with this. None of this. Okay, just stay with this and feel that energy rise. Okay, it's the sound man. Okay, let's do it. Let's go get it. Run in place. Come make my teens look out. Hey. Come make my teens run away.
the mountain from a river, how comes I got some fish in my water? Additional Pacific lands to the slaughter. I for my son and the son for my daughter. And the way I know how to something.
Oh, that made me feel heated. Thank you very much. My name is Tamati Patuai. I hail from another centre of Aotearoa, Leonis. It's on the east side of Auckland. I'm Ngāti Whātua, Te Kaore Wāmaki, Te Tau'u. On my father's side, on my mother's side, I'm Irish, Welsh, Scottish, and for some reason they're proud to say, not English. But I'm mihi to all of my cousins today. And I want to say also to the taumata who welcomed us in today, thank you so much. I had a tangi to hear your kōrero, because much of the reo and much of the kōrero on the taumata today was about our reo, and about how over time it has diminished. And that really stuck my heart. And so, for all of you here in Otaki, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Toa, Te Ati Awa, I want to jump up and celebrate. I want to jump up and celebrate. I want to raise my hands up in the air. For my great-grandmother, who moved from a village in Kaipara, and who had to give up her villagehood to move to this idea of moving towards work next to her cousins in Orake, to give up her villagehood, to give up her reo, to give up her culture, to do this thing that she was being told by others to do, which was to find money. And as we all know, there was a lot of decline, a lot of diminishment there. And my heart breaks consistently when I think about my great-grandmother. So to you and Otaki, if I go away with anything, I go away from this hui with the inspiration that huge things are possible. So Otaki, tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā koutou. Okay, to the kaupapa. Waiora, and I'm so happy Matua Reese and our whānau have already covered these things. I mean, I certainly don't want to stand here and patronise anyone and preach to the converted. So thank you for your kōrero. Matua, thank you for your kōrero. Water is life, we get it. I love, as part of our language construct, that to understand someone's name, or to ask for someone's name, or ask for who someone is, we say, ko wai koe, ko wai tō ingoa. And it's something that's been practiced and talked about more. Ko wai koe. If we were to say that as a statement, you are water. Ko wai koe. And then a question, ko wai koe. Whose waters are you? From whose waters are you? So significant water. This is my father standing next to Te Waio Taiki up in Point England, Glen Innes. Can I get a show of hands to see who knows Glen Innes in East Auckland? Wow, yeah, cool. Most of us, actually. So he's standing on the east coast of Glen Innes, and his name is Te Noho Tupatuai, and in the background there is Hokulea Waka. Behind him are 3,000 primary children. And we were celebrating the day when the Hokulea from Hawaii with Nainoa Thompson and his crew came in to visit us in Monastile, Little Jihad. He's standing also near the Omaru Awa, which is the kaupapa of his kōrero and our project. And I have to pay significant homage to Ngāti Pāo, Ngāti Whātua and Ngāi Tai, who are the kaitiaki of that place, those waters and those lands. And this particular place, Glen Innes, Kumi Taituha, who was a well-known composer from Ngāti Maniapoto, he reflected on Glen Innes and Paniua as Te Uku Toia. He actually named it himself in the 80s. He gave it a name, and we've taken it on. Te Uku Toia because of the fertile lands, the uku, and where they drew the waka up in the old days, because there was a really abundant place to be in Tāmaki Makaurau at this particular site. So the Omaru is named after Maru Tuahu, who was a tupuna of the area, Ngāti Maru. If you are Ngāti Maru, if you're from the south side of Kainui, is named after Mount Iwi, who's also a very early inhabitant, indigenous, pre-waka of the place here. My father moved to Poninga in NGI with his great-grandmother, and he's lived there all his life. And so our family have been in that place for many generations. He obviously swam in the place, fished from the place, got the puhata, the watercress, that whole Māori way of living in this particular area, and we know it very well. There was a clipping in the Herald about 4 weeks ago, that talked about 41 different points in the Auckland region that are currently leaking raw sewage into the waterways in Auckland. And this gives the premise for our particular initiative, because we aren't going to stand up like that anymore. There are so many studies being done on that particular awa, the Ōmaru. We can look through every nook and cranny in terms of the fish species, the riparian species, the ecologies that surround and are inside these waters. And Auckland Council are still having a very difficult time, so much so that the grade is as low as it gets. It's still an F, and the E. coli, the mercury, the lead is, I don't want to say abundant, but it's as abundant as it needs to be. The water quality, the flow patterns, nutrient cycling, habitat quality, biodiversity is severely affected. Which brings up us, Man Ave. We're a small community trust, and I put it over here because my wife's over here. My whānau have started it, and we started our group because it was all about whānau for whānau. We wanted to tackle some big issues, we wanted to support community initiatives, and get behind some important kaupapa. We engage with community potential by any means necessary. So we created the Ora Initiative, Ōmaru Restorative Initiatives, our actions initiatives, and we saw the progression of Wanganui. So we look at that proverb and we say, Koau te awa ko te awa koau. We look at Ōmaru and we ask ourselves, we bring hundreds of young people and community to the side of the river every February and summer, and we say to them, if I am this river and the river is me, what is the river saying I am? And there's that deathly silence in everyone. But the children speak. They say, you're pari, you stink, you're lonely, you're neglected, you need help. The children, they really come forward and really respond. And then the doors open, the heart opens, the consciousness opens to the reality of our situation, and we lead them through a very creative expose of the history of the river, what's possible with the river, and what's possible if we do something together. So since 2013, we've planted 17,000 trees. Now that's good. But I want to say that we could plant and reforest this place, given the numbers of people that have come back to the awa. We've had 800 volunteers over time. We've had 8,000 participants in our events, and they're still hungry for more. Their hearts are open, their minds are clear. They don't want this anymore, so they want to do something. 16 schools engaged inside the curriculum, so their curriculums are now adjusting to this kaupapa of environmentalism and Ōmaru River. So I have to run around all these schools trying to sort of get them to these different events. 16 major events, 3 tons of surface rubbish collected. Now we might think that's a lot, 3 tons, and it is a lot, it's too much, but it's not enough. There is so much effect in our river. I just want to show you a couple of slides in terms of how we do the mahi. Yeah, it's mahi. It's hard and sometimes it's really gross. We get dirty, we get some of that paru on us. And I really try not to have people get that paru on us, but it's part of the work. But the joy that people experience when we're together and doing this mahi is incredible. And that's how we're going to make these interventions. That's how we want to cause these transformations, is to open the hearts and have people feel joyous about what's possible for their futures. The kids are a huge part of our mahi. Like I said before, all 16 schools are engaged in our work. Excuse me for the hand, I'm checking out the screen as well. One of the biggest projects we have that has really emerged from this kaupapa is called Te Weu, and Te Weu is focused specifically on rangatahi and regenerating and restoring that idea of kaitiakitanga in an urban environment. Now, we're a community trust, and although we are committed and partner with iwi and mana whenua, we are not an iwi organisation. We are not a mana whenua organisation, although we are partnered closely with those groups. We've had significant press over the time, from print to television to journals, research journals that have covered our mahi. And we're really excited about that kind of coverage because this is a global kaupapa. This is a big kōrero, and we want to make sure that our localized micro conversation gets out to the globe. Mā te huru huru karere te manu. Like I said, we're a small organisation, and we find it very difficult to run around this small community. The two of us, sometimes the one of us, trying to generate this kaupapa constantly, daily, monthly, and yearly. It's a difficult thing. So the kinds of resource commitments are really important, and that smell of that oli rag really helps. And our commitments are clear, that we will raise these kids, these urban children, in this conscious kōrero around kaitiakitanga, environmentalism, so that they become, that affinity and relationship with your environment grows and just generates hope for them. And we'll commit also to delivering this effective transformative approach. This is a pictorial. This is a pictorial haerenga that I put forward that I'll finish on.
Te pau, te toko I whenuru, te toko I wherani, toki atu kia, ko te mumu, ko te awha, ko te mumu, ko te awha, ko te maniki kai o tā tāhiri panapana, ārau I runga, ārau I raro, ka whai ka more, I runga, ka whai ka more, I raro, tēnā ko te pau, tēnā ko te pau, orongo, norongo mauri, ora ka oa e. Hoi no, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora tāna te humai no te paki. As you can see, all of our kōrero this morning actually interconnect. So when we're talking about determinants of wellness and well-being from an Indigenous perspective, the wellness of the Māori of our water and our land interconnects with the wellness of our language. So I think there's been a really good tūhono, if you like, between all of our presentations this morning. It's fantastic to see champions like Tamati who are leading the way, and their idea, I think, Tamati, that we talked about of critical mass, about being the tuataki tini and bringing our people together is probably the most effective form of change and transformation. So you're taking on board a lot of the key messages from your kōrero. I know that our funders are here and they've met the kōrero, so I'm hoping too that from your presentation today and our other kai kōrero as well, we can achieve those great things that you talked about. Our final two kai kōrero for this morning are from here, so I'm not going to take too long to introduce them. They can probably do that. But they've been here a long time, born and bred, Otaki, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Whare Raukawa, Caleb Royal and Pataka Moore. Much like Tamati, actually, they've championed the Māori of our land and our water here in this area for a long time. Both of them have been engaged in a number of environmental projects and environmental studies, and they bring a really different perspective. Their perspective is one of growing up here, one of embracing the tribal traditions of Ngāti Raukawa, Te Auki Te Tonga, and they also bring a willingness to reach out and to engage and connect with other people who are doing similar things. So I'm not going to talk too much about your presentation, guys. I'll let you do that. Engari, ko mai te pakipaki, mo Caleb, rao ka pakapa.
Tēnā rā tātou I tēnei rā. Mui atu kia koe maihana o tō mihi. Huri no ki te whare a tēnā tātou katoa. Well, kia ora all. I'm just going to have a quick chat about our presentation today. I've got nothing on the dancing scene. Don't expect any moves from me. I'd just like to start off with a whakatauki, te tiro whakamuri ka haere whakamua. And that whakatauki is about looking back over our history to inform our future and the direction that we sail into. I think it's poignant today to be thinking about that whakatauki. And for Pātaka and myself, it actually is, it's representative of our journey that we've had with Te Wānau Raukawa. The presentation that we have today, it's about our journey. It's really about our story, about remembering our past, reclaiming our futures. It's something that we feel very strongly about. Our presentation is environmentally focused, which is what you'd expect. But for us, it's really about remembering our past. It's also about restoring our relationships, regaining and restoring our responsibilities, and then claiming that future. Not just for us. I think the journey that we've got in front of us is, it's not a short one, and it's going to be one that's going to be inherited by our tamariki and our mokopuna. So without no further ado, I want to pass over to Pātaka, and he's going to get started. Go over.
Okay. Just to begin, I thought we'd just provide a little bit of context here for those who are not entirely familiar with our story. So to go back about 200 years, back to the early 1800s, prior to and even for an extensive period after this sort of 1840 mark, Māori held absolute authority over themselves and their lands. Decisions about the environment and our interaction with the environment were made by Māori for Māori. Our tupuna lived according to kaupapa Māori, and decisions were consistent with our values and principles handed down to us over centuries, over generations. The social structures of the day were dictated by these kaupapa. This ensured that decisions were made appropriate to the situation and to the people. Those kaupapa, for example, were whakapapa, loosely described as genealogical links, kotahitanga, the desire and ability to unite, and rangatiratanga, strong decision-making abilities and structures. The interaction with the environment was informed by these principles. Kaitiakitanga, care for the environment, ukaipōtanga, belonging to a place or an area, and rangatiratanga, appropriate decision-making and boundary setting, for example. And further, all decisions around our environment and the way that our tupuna and ancestors interacted with waterways was dictated by kaupapa and, importantly, informed by our worldview. Our Māori worldview was understood by our ancestors very well. It came to them naturally. It was their explanation of our world. Importantly, it had our human us within it, not at the centre, but as a subsection of this world. It was specific to these islands of Aotearoa and Te Waipounamu. This worldview had Atua or deity as the creators, and parent gods were Papatuanuku and Ranginui, sky and earth. Their children were located between them, and our people understood the interaction between all of these different parts of the environment. Our creation stories informed the way we saw parts of the world and importantly dictated the reciprocation between people and the environment. Fast forward to the last century. By 1900, we saw a major shift in decision making for our people and for our environment. Our people were no longer determining their own future, but rather they had that done by others. All of the typical measures of health and prosperity were skewed. Incarceration rates were up, life expectancy and general health and other statistics were well down. By 1975, intergenerational language and culture was at an all-time low for us here on the coast. You've heard from our tūmaki, no one under the age of 30 was speaking Te Reo Māori, and this for us was a major indicator of our engagement with our own culture. Essentially, a disconnection from the environment occurs at this point in time also. This is due largely to the environmental degradation, loss of lands and territories, and an obliging willingness to dictate by our invaders or colonisers. Today, we have very few Māori with the ability to influence decision-making, be it at a national, regional, or even at a local level. The diagram on the board here provides you with an inkling or an insight into how most of our environmental decisions are made. Up on the top left there, you see that the central government releases its priorities periodically. The national policy statements are released, or NPS. They can't be in contradiction with with government priorities. Furthermore, regional policy statements cannot be in conflict with the NPS, and down at a very local level, that is all of the rules and regulations and policies that we live under, what we can and can't do in our rivers, what we can and can't do at the beach, what we can and can't do on lands, are dictated by our regional and district plans. We are wanting to get away from this approach and actually do something about it. Caleb and I have been talking about monitoring for a while now, and but so do the authorities. But there seems to be this obsession with monitoring and then monitoring and then monitoring. And not very often do we find ourselves actually doing something after we complete our monitoring. The current monitoring framework is not based on Taupapa Māori, but rather is based on values and measures that are not ours. Restoring our environment is ultimately what we want to achieve, but getting to that point and actually how we do it is the big question for us. Establishing Māori values and Māori measurements are where we are wanting to be. So in terms of restoring our relationship, one of the things we've been working on here is oral histories. Here at Te Whanamoroka, we've been trying to make a small contribution, and one way in which we've done this is by interviewing our elders, those who hold the secrets and knowledge of our past. We've spent tens of thousands of hours recording elders. One of the first papers that all students do at Te Whanamoroka is to complete interviews with tūkau mātua. This paper attempts to reconnect individuals with their elders, and then students must record, analyse, and report on those interviews. This is an attempt to capture the all-important perspectives and knowledge of our elders. This is used to re-inform our worldviews and the worldviews of our children. Further, the stories of our elders will inform future decision-making. We have used these recordings to inform site selection and values at many of the sites that we've been monitoring. We have revisited these sites and we are working towards management plans and restoration plans for several major areas that are of significance to our people. Our dream is to have multiple large-scale environmental restoration projects working to enable our people to reconnect with our environment here on the coast. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce you to a couple of our interviewees. This is Uncle Paddy Rikihama. The late Uncle Paddy Rikihama passed away a couple of years ago. His full name was Patrick Pairuruku Rangawhenua Rikihama, born in 1919. Caleb and I had the pleasure of interviewing Uncle Paddy. He's there on the left with his niece, Auntie Queenie. She might be in the crowd here somewhere as well, I think. Caleb and I visited him on a cool autumn day about 12, 13 years ago now. Uncle Paddy spoke about the stream as if it was exactly how he grew up in the stream. He spoke about it with an intimacy. He spoke about it with a tear in his eye. He grew up on the Mangapodi stream. The Mangapodi stream is a small stream here on the northern side of Otaki. And it was his playground. And when you listen to him, when you could hear him talk about the stream, he would say things like, ah, and you could hear that real ah from his stomach, saying that was my playground. I drank from the stream, I played in the stream, I raised my kids in the stream, and now it is no longer. It's a very little polluted creek on the halfway through, very little polluted creek running on the northern side of our town. The other interviewee that I just wanted to touch on was Uncle Wehi o Te Rangi Sylvanus Royal. He's there on the right with Auntie Hiro on the left. Two very well-known kaumātua in Otaki here, affectionately known as Hiro and Wehi. Born in 1930, again on the same stream, but just in a section down from the Rikihamas. Uncle Wehi spoke about what the stream provided him, could speak in detail about the fish that he caught from the stream and about how he cooked these fish. He called the tuna or the eel the most versatile fish in the world. You can jelly it, you can boil it, you can steam it, you can fry it, he just went on and on. And Uncle Wehi is still alive today, and he recollects these stories with his grandchildren. And I was lucky enough to be there at one of those interviews. There are many of these interviews, though, that we hold here at Te Wānanga Raukawa, having been collected over the years, and they are our treasures for the future, our gems, hopefully informing future decision making.
Kia ora anō. I couldn't see the screen. But I'm getting there now. Just this slide here, I suppose all of the stories, I think we have conducted on in total around 150 interviews with kaumātua now, and they've really formed a very thorough sort of picture of their actions and interactions with the streams, waterways and coasts within our rohe. What it hasn't done for us is restored our personal relationship with those places and spaces. And that's one of the things that we've been lucky enough to embark on in the last few years. And part of that, if I look through these pictures here, at the top we've got a picture of some tuatua, pippies. We call them pippies here. Scientific fraternity call them tuatua. Yes, we understand they're different. We call them pipi. Yeah, I know. Now, what was really interesting about gathering these pipi from Waiwiri and the Hokio area is the tides there are quite different from Otaki. And you wouldn't think so, it's just down the road. But understanding the mood, the nature, the different types of tides there helps to inform the, I suppose, that modi of that place and how you act and interact with it. Understanding our tides, understanding the birds that are coming and going, the kuaka, the godwits that go from Siberia to Aotearoa and back again, their actions and interactions. Below that picture, we've got a picture of, some monitoring we did on Te Hakari. Now, it was a magic day. It was an absolutely beautiful day. What you don't see in that picture is beneath the water, it is absolutely thick with hornwort, which is an invasive noxious weed. That weed is then choking and killing pretty much the fish life in the lake. So it's actually really learning a whole lot more about, restoring that relationship with those places. You get to understand the pressures that they're under. But one of the benefits from it is actually the interactions with our whanaunga. To get onto the lake, we had to get permission with our whānau from our other whanaunga, who we then took out. We then shared the information that we learned, and it was a real learning experience. The bottom picture is out of the Oho River mouth, where there's a karoro breeding ground with a blackback gull. And the really interesting thing about out there was that, you really saw the seasonal variation and the availability of kai over the seasons. We went from early spring with the karoro eggs, then we'd have the whitebait and the inanga coming up our streams. As you move into summer, you get the kanai or the mullet coming into the streams. And then later on, as it warms up properly in raumati, you start getting, your patiki and your flounders moving into your streams. And then you get your tamuri or your snapper just off the coast. And then finally moving into winter or in the autumn period, you get your tunahiki heading back out again. But the actual interaction with the place and restoring that relationship with those places is understanding, you talk about the pulse, the beat of the actual river, the system of nature, and understanding the pulse of nature and all of the different food sources and the interaction, the relationship you can have with your place. So it was, for us, the oral history informed those values, those species, but it's up to us, and I suppose us individually, to go out and restore the relationship. It doesn't restore itself. Visiting the sites, fishing the same sites as our tupuna, and then beginning to understand what's going on. One of the tragedies of these places is that when you go there, you're very much aware of the vulnerability of these places. The beach, the breeding grounds for the karoro, dirt bike. Say everyone's got a dirt bike, I've got a dirt bike, I love dirt bikes. But not there. There's a time and a place, and the place is not there. Then there's all of the other bits. What else did I write down? I wrote other things down when we're talking about them. Oh, dogs. Dogs have a field day when these guys hatch out. It just goes on and on. I better keep moving off time. I started talking, it ended me. I suppose in restoring our relationship, this next point is actually reclaiming our responsibilities. And this is it's a major thing for us to be doing. I've sort of approached this point with 3 different actions: is the development of planning documents, the research in the state of our taonga species, and then the redevelopment of plans and policies that currently exist that are not ours. So in the picture there, we've got Te Haringa Whakamua. This is a planning document put together by Te Atiawa, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Tō, where we talk about our aspirations for the environment. We talk about our plans for the future. We've developed 196 different tikanga or policy type things that relate to the environment, the infrastructure within our district, the hazards, our response to heritage and transport. So it's actually taking control and stating this is our stick in the sand. So it's a bit of a planning document that we've put together, and it's amazingly enough, we did it in 2012. It's beginning to get legs. We sort of left it for a while, and all of a sudden it starts to gain legs. But in the background from that, we've been doing these other bits and pieces. I am struggling. Oh, there we go. Is researching this, the state of some of our tong species. And in the picture there, you've got tuna, or our eels. And what we're finding in some of the places, I didn't see that. What we're finding in a lot of our waterways is that we're getting like intestinal worms developing in our tuna, embedding into the flesh. We're seeing tuna with fungal growths around their fins, their lips, it's pretty disgusting. But for us, these are telling us, these are the indicators that things are shocking. A useful tool that we've been looking at, I'll do it again and it'll move. Go. Is tuna otoliths, which is the air bone in eels, where you can take the bone out. Yes, you have to eat the tuna. And you can determine how old the eel is, but it also tells you a whole lot of information about that tuna. It tells you how fast it's growing. It tells you, which gives you an indication of the quality of the environment that it's living in, if restoration works have worked or not. These things, the bone tells you a whole lot of information, so it's something that we use quite extensively in our work. I need to move really quickly now. I shouldn't have spoken so much at the start. I have of talking too much. I suppose that's part of that reclaiming responsibilities. The other thing that we've been doing has been working alongside regional councils, which I think there's a whole lot of well-meaning people in there that are constrained by law, which stops them from doing really good things. So what we've actually done is gone into this natural resource plan, and we've written into the plan, we've actually participated in the process, and we've included in the plan that we've identified a whole lot of sites of significance to Māori. By doing so, we've afforded them a whole lot more protection from inappropriate use and subdivision and all sorts of other bits and pieces and discharging and all the rest of these nasty things that are happening in the world. So we've managed to protect our sites of significance somewhat. But what it's also done is we've identified that all of the fresh and coastal waterways now within the region are managed for mahinga kai, to support mahinga kai and Māori customary use. Now that Māori customary use, it might be, to whakanoa objects, people, or to cleanse. But either way, and what it's done is it's set a policy direction, not just for us, but for the wider regional, I suppose, objectives, in that we need to be managing all of our waterways for mahinga kai, the gathering of food, and for cultural use. So that we think is, we're hopeful for where that's going to go. Managing into the future. So I suppose moving on into the future, it's we've got a whole lot of challenges in front of us. We've got to have a lifetime of work in front of us. One of the things that we've been progressing outside of the wānanga here with our local hapu is we've negotiated an integrated catchment management agreement last year, which is a bit of a mouthful to say we're going to work together. The difference with this is actually we are. And some of the opportunities coming out of that, we've got streams that Pātaka talked about, the Mangapodi stream. Every year, contractors come through and remove the weed. Now that's a paid gig by the council. What we've negotiated with the council is that gig will come to us. We will then give that to the kura, and the kura can do that work instead of a Joe contractor. So that's about restoring that relationship of our tamariki with that waterway. And there's a whole raft of other bits and pieces I could talk about if I didn't have -3 minutes to do it in. Another managing into the future comment I want to make if I've got the time, I figured while I'm here I can. I apologise profusely, but we're already over time. Let's go with it. Is the opportunity, you guys may have driven from Wellington to Tuananga yesterday or today. You might have noticed a new road. We've managed to negotiate a license to occupy with NZTA. So this is a bit of a role reversal. An agency of the Crown is giving some land back to us to manage whilst that road is still there. Now, I've invested 630 million in that road, so hopefully it's going to stay there for a wee while. But that little picture there you can see is part of that area that we will be managing into the future. We will be looking, come on, speak to me, a picture of some waterways coming up, and go down here. We really want to see how effective some of this, the restoration work that's occurred on these waterways will be. So we've actually, they've agreed to a monitoring plan. So those are some of the waterways there. There's been a whole lot of planting go in. What we really want to know is, we don't care about the science stuff. We don't care about what the conductivity is. We don't care about the nutrient load. What we want to know, are our tuna healthy? Are our koura healthy? Are our inanga migrating to and from these areas? Can we won't be gathering kai from there, but could we, if this restoration was done somewhere else? So we will be developing or building a pātuna there together migrating tuna out to sea. It's a quick picture. There's an artistic impression from Lewi Couch. That was an art display down on the Avon River in Christchurch. So we'll be looking to set one of these up for realsies and to be catching tuna heke as they migrate out to sea and start monitoring those things. So we're looking at bringing in cultural health indicators or Māori health indicators on our waterways that we've been gifted back, returned. Another monitoring technique that we're picking up on from this has been largely developed with Te Arawa, not by us. This is developed in Te Arawa by Willie Emery and Ian Kusavs, and this is the revitalisation of the toe coda technique for monitoring for your freshwater crayfish, kiwai. So on your left hand, the older picture has, I love it, you get these old kaua out on a waka in these suits, gathering freshwater crayfish. And on the other side is the revitalisation of that technique. So we're going to be looking to instill that into our monitoring of these streams in this new area that we'll be acquiring. I suppose managing into the future for us is making sure that we're looking at those multiple outcomes to support the Māori of the area. And when I talk about the Māori, I talk about the mood of an area, but I've got a little picture there of a Mānuka nursery and a few bees looking back Mānuka. Now, the reason why I put that up is because there's a few reasons. Mānuka is really important for constructing pātuna. You need the stakes, you need the brush. It's also really important for the construction of taukoura. So if we can grow these things there, all the resources, all the scientific equipment is at our disposal. It's right there. It's a medicinal plant. It's rongoa. It's also a material for taiaha. It's also really great firewood. But in addition to all of those things, the whole bee, the honey industry, it provides an economic benefit to our whānau, which provides an opportunity for us and our whānau to actually to do a different job. It's about restoring that relationship, but also providing the economic support to do that. What we also know about manuka, it's got this unique ability to actually remove fecal coliforms and fecal matter from the water table. So it actually takes the fecal dirty stuff and turns it into all this useful, awesome stuff. So there's ecological benefits, so rather than planting up willows, if we start looking at putting in masses of manuka, we can actually start to see some real changes in our environment that also support economic, social, Māori growth and industry. So I've spoken way too long. I got 2 minutes about 10 minutes ago. In summary, our values and worldview once informed all of our decisions pertaining to our environment. The invaders, we like to refer to them, ignored our values and placed theirs in the ascendant. The values of others have actually compromised our environment. And I think we can shrug it off and go, you know what? The current situation we find ourselves in, it's not about doing. It's our obligation to start to fix it up again, but it's not about doing. We shouldn't feel guilty about it. Actually, we're in a state, Māoridom is in a state of renewal. We're remembering our past and remembering it well, and we're moving forward, which is a whole lot better than a whole lot of other places and organisations. Our values are treasured not just by ourselves, but I think there's Indigenous nations around the world. There is, and non-Māori in New Zealand, when we start talking about fish and these things, they have an affinity for them, and they support us. So the non-Māori community are supportive of us. I think we just, in closing, we must continue to challenge and change the status quo. And our real goal is to look at the restoration of rangatira. So I think I've overstayed my welcome, and so kia ora koutou.
Tēnā kōrero, nothing more from me today. This happens when you go over time, Caleb. I'm going to ask this mother now, Rachel, to come and just provide some more kōrero before we wrap up this session of the day. But again, fantastic to hear all this kōrero. Again, it all interconnects and interrelates to everything that we're working on. So a big round of applause, please, for all of our speakers this morning.
Tēnā koutou katoa. It must be 1 o'clock because that's what the program says. So thank you very much to this morning's presenters. So I've got some important pānui, some important announcements, and then we're going to go and get lunch. So I suggest we just stretch and take in some air, clean air. Right. Your lunches are in a brown paper bag. Okay, so we've got about 175 lunches that are cut and put into a brown paper bag. Now, you'll notice that they're on 3 tables that look like these, big brown tables with a black tablecloth. There's 1 table that has a white tablecloth, and it's a rectangular table. On that table are the special lunches for people who ordered a gluten-free lunch, a dairy-free lunch, a vegan lunch. But those who ordered crayfish, sorry. So the white tablecloth is those for special lunches. So we're now going to have lunch and go to the site visits. Now those who are going to Māori Land, the Māori Land Hub, which is the newly launched hub in the main street. Moko Morris, is Moko here? Ah, there she is, Moko. This is Moko, for those who are going to the Māori Land Hub. And we want you to get your lunch and then go with moko, walk down to the hub, have your lunch there, and they might even show you a movie that was locally made. Is that right, moko? Okay, so that's the Māori Land Hub group. Meihanga, you've got 2 people who want to have a tour of this building and to know about it. So the 2 people who have registered an interest in knowing about the building of this particular building, you just have to find Meihanga when you've got your lunch and have lunch with him. Queenie is taking 21 people to Rangiatea and the Pipi Trail. So Queenie, could you stand and wave? This is Queenie. Aye. So Queenie's group are going to get their lunch and then come down to this end of the building, and you'll see a circle of chairs. You're going to have lunch there first because we wouldn't take food into the cemetery and the church. So we want you to have lunch here, and then Queenie will take you on that tour. There's 21 of you. Now Denise, is Denise here? So Denise's group looks like Denise is, you know, a lot of people getting called away on their cell phones. It's terrible. So Denise's group, could you get your lunches and then meet on the other side of the building under the scoreboard over there, home and guests. And Denise has got 15 people that she's taking on a guided tour of the Wānanga, including all those buildings over there, which you'll notice are recycled buildings. So she'll tell you about them, their origins, the kohanga reo, and the history of this campus. So meet under the scoreboard over there with your lunch, and I imagine Denise will tell you where and have lunch. Over on this side, which is the western side of this building, there's a kura kaupapa, kura iwi, and there are 21 people who have signed up to go with Moko and with Merle to see the Mara Kai, the gardens that the children have developed, the food gardens over here. Oh, Moko, there you are. So Moko, could you do a big wave? That's Moko. And 21 people are going to go with you. Moko, where do you want to have lunch? I didn't hear it. Here. Okay, so Moko's group, perhaps over that side of the building as well. Have your lunch here, and then Moko will take you over to the kura. The children are having lunch at 1 till 2 over there, huh? That's a Māori language zone. The children only speak, and the teachers only speak Māori over there. Then there's 2 tours we're combining, which are Dale and Te Atawhai, and they have got 8 people in their group. They've asked that you meet just outside the main doors. There's some tables there. So could those 8 people meet Dale and Te Atawhai? And you're going to visit the kohanga reo, which is the Māori language preschools, 2 of them, which also have developed Marakai food gardens, and they're environmentally conscious groups. So they're going to take you to see what preschool children are doing here. Then there's the Otaki Beach Walk, for those who would like to go to the beach, which is west, just out here. So Pātaka and Caleb are going to take the Otaki Beach Walk. Is it still fine outside? It is? Okay, so they want you to gather outside with your lunch, and you're going to have lunch out at the beach. So go and sit at the surf club, have your lunch. So that's, there's 13 of you doing that, and Huia has got a vehicle ready outside as well. So, okay, so they would like to meet here. Caleb and Pātaka's group, could you get your lunch, meet here, and then they'll take you out and provide transport to the beach. And then the other group is the Waitohu Stream Restoration Group. There are 8 people, and we've got a vehicle that Jim Matheson's going to drive, and I've got my car, and we may need one other. That's the Waitohu Stream Restoration Group. So we will also meet out here. So grab your lunch, come down to the door that you came in, and we'll organise transport for you to go and have a look at this stream restoration project. which is out at the beach as well. So that's everybody in terms of the site visits. So you've got the next couple of hours to be wandering around, getting to know people outside rather than in here. So that's the lunches. Your tour guides. Now, can you please make sure you're back by 3 o'clock? At 3 o'clock, for those of you who are not used to this morning and afternoon tea lark, we do this here in New Zealand. So could you be back at 3 o'clock for your afternoon tea? It will be in the dining room where you had breakfast and where we gathered this morning. So across the road, afternoon tea at 3 o'clock, and then we want you to be in the classrooms for the 3 sessions that go from 3:30 to 5:30 promptly, so that we can try and keep to time. So come back for afternoon tea, across at the dining room, then you'll be going to those 3 last sessions of the day. We're also asking that you be seated back in here for dinner at 6 o'clock. So here is where we'll be having dinner at 6 o'clock. We've got entertainment, a guitarist, Seth, who's on the desk just outside the door at 6:15, and we've got a Māori kapahaka group, an entertainment group at 6:30. And our keynote speaker this evening is Dr. Lance O'Sullivan. So please be here back by 6 o'clock. Now, the other good news, that's all the good news, is that if you haven't explored your bag yet, in your bag you've got a $20 voucher from Te Tākupu. And Te Tākupu are the publishing arm at Te Wānanga o Raukawa. Over there is Emma Whiterod, and she's doing a big wave. And you can redeem something for your $20 over there. So a gift from Te Wānanga o Raukawa of $20, and you can either purchase a journal or a book or a contribution towards it over there. Are there any other announcements? Wow. So it must still be 1 o'clock. It says lunch. So if you would like to now, okay, yes. So what I'm going to do is hand back to our MC, May Hannah Jury, and thank you, May Hannah, for the work this morning and keeping us completely on time.
So we'll do a karakia for Kai. Our tikanga here at Te Wānanga o Raukawa is that we say a karakia we have our main part of the day. Part of the idea behind the karakia is to receive the benefits from the kai that's been provided for us, but to also unite and put some positive energy into the kai that we're about to eat. So without any further ado, I'll say a short karakia and then invite you to head over to that side of Nā mai, nā hua, o te wao nui, o te wai tai, o te wai Māori, nā tanaroa, nā roro, nā tāne, nā maru, o rangi nui e tui ho nei, whakatuana e takato wake nei, tuturu o whiti whakamaua, kia tīna, tīna, haumi e, kui e, tai e, tōna tata.
That's great. It's kind of hard, like, people are even from school. Up there, that street, yeah. How are you going?
Good. Yeah.
Good tweeting.
Yeah, some tweeting happening.
Yeah. Cool. Are there many people watching?
Some, not a whole lot, but
Yeah.
still some.
Cool.
Some have been commenting.
And will that mean that it's
Yeah, we'll be.
oh, cool. Yeah, I've shared it on the team page.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've done on JR and IFIP, so these people know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that work and stuff.
Are you going to go on a site visit?
I was just thinking about the local one. I've already been to Nottingham. What about you?
Go to the beach.
The beach one?
Oh, bro, I'm hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
See you later.
Yeah.